printing money is like alcoholism.
The good effects come first. The bad effects only come later.
By nature, it has to get progressively worse.
We tend to only change when the pain
Well, that's exactly right.
becomes so acute.
World, we're having a sovereign debt crisis. Don't you get it?
Yeah.
Pay attention now.
Why is this such a blind spot for people?
There are two sets of rules. One set of rules for them, one set of rules for the rich and powerful.
It's part of American exceptionalism, I guess. They just think the dollar is and always will be. And I'm like, guys, open and monetary history book. It's either hyperinflation or you get conquered.
War and money printing kind of go hand in hand.
It's genocide.
DOGE, by the way, is a generally good thing, and it will help.
This is the Department of Government Efficiency, not the shitcoin.
I would hasten to say that those who think it's a total solution to the problem, I disagree.
They don't know how big the problem is.
Exactly. The problem's too big.
Yeah.
You know, when I first grokked that, it was like my mind was blown. Do you know what I mean? Like, holy shit, the monetary lie is about to disappear.
Yes.
And it's so hopeful and so, I mean, it's friggin' fabulous.
You have just published your first book, right?
Yeah, my first and probably only book.
First and only. All right. So this is
I'm not doing another one. It was a lot of work.
Big impact. I know you've been busting your ass for the
I
past
have.
6 months to get it done. So
Yeah.
I'm happy to see it in print.
Thank
and
you.
here it is, the big print.
Yeah.
What happened to America and how sound money will fix it. And we've got that orange cover, which is the Bitcoin subliminal messaging.
Yeah, Bitcoin messaging. I don't have Bitcoin in the title, but we'll get them.
Yeah, no, well, it's a good way to indirectly orange pill people, because
I think
sometimes
so.
you come at people with a Bitcoin word and they can have this repulsion towards it.
Immediately, a lot of people jump to Sam Bankman-Fried and
Yes.
crypto nonsense, and they just don't even want to hear it.
Yes. There's
Yeah.
still the conflation of crypto and Bitcoin,
Correct.
which is a major problem we're all dealing
It
with.
always has been, yeah.
So, I mean, what was your inspiration to start writing this? Obviously, you've been in the sound money game for a long time.
I have. Yeah, I'm an old guy.
You've been in the Bitcoin game for quite a long time as well. So,
Yeah.
like, what
Yeah,
got you to finally put it all into paper
I
here?
put this in a tweet the other day. It was kind of like I got tapped on the shoulder, by some higher power.
Mm.
And I was watching some TV program, and I was watching the blue and red debate, and I was so frustrated because both sides weren't even talking about anything related to what really is the underlying problem. I mean,
Right.
and so what the book posits is that America is broken. We're in a fourth turning, as you've so well identified and labeled it. The issue is, what is money? And we're in this fourth turning, and people aren't focusing on the real underlying issue. And it just was driving me nuts.
Right.
And I thought to myself, somebody's got to try to make the country aware of the fact that the fundamental issue is the unsound money, not, blue politics, red politics. It goes across all of that. And then I thought to myself, maybe I could do that because I'm older, experienced. I've seen how the country deteriorated. I've been in the sound money thing for a long time. But there are a lot of great Bitcoin books written. I'm not sure the world needs another one. And somebody on Twitter recently said, we just keep rewriting the Bitcoin standard. And, to be honest with you, this has some of the Bitcoin standard in it. I fully credit Safe. That's the best Bitcoin book ever written. It always will be, was the first, and, et cetera. But I've given it to friends, and sometimes the reaction is it's a little too heavy, a little too textbooky, and they kind of get lost, and they don't necessarily finish it or even read all of it. I mean, those of us who are hardcore Austrian economy, we love it. All Bitcoiners love it. But and same with Lynn's book. Lynn's book's a brilliant book. It's fabulous. It's probably the best book on money ever written. But again, your normie doesn't read it. And so I thought to myself, maybe I can tell a tale, tell my story, because people like stories. I mean, the Bible's just stories talking about narratives, and they're messages in the stories, but they're stories, right? And people watch TV and they watch Netflix. They're watching stories. They don't watch documentaries or courses on something. And maybe if I tell this as a story and lay it out, take them through my history and take them to the history of Bitcoin, the history of sound money, because the United States was built on sound money, really. I mean, the founding fathers understood it. Then I can show them why we've drifted away and how we've drifted away, how bad it's gotten, and how really that is the fundamental. I mean, when people talk about solving politics, they want to drain the swamp. Well, this is the plug. If we pull the plug on unsound money and we go back to sound money, a lot of things will get better. At least that's my strong belief. And so I tried to write a book. If this, one of your questions I know that you gave me here is, how will you measure success here? I will measure success as if this book kind of goes viral and gets traction and interest and readership outside of the Bitcoin community. I mean, I think Bitcoiners who read this book are going to like it. It's, you know, because I'm not really saying anything they don't already know, and that's not new, and I'm supporting Bitcoin, obviously, but that's really not our audience. Our audience is the skeptic. Our audience is the person who doesn't even realize that Bitcoin exists, or kind of realizes it but puts it in the crypto bucket, you know. And so I'm trying to, and so, you know, some people might say, well, you dumbed it down a little bit. I did. I mean, you know, Bitcoiners might read it and say, hey, you know, you got a chapter on explaining Bitcoin. I don't need that. Fine, skip that chapter.
Right.
You know, I mean, early on, I had a test reader read it, and they got into like 2 chapters in. They said, what's the Federal Reserve? And I said, okay. So I have a footnote, right? So but you know, we assume we know it, right?
Sure.
We've all read Edwin Griffin, but you know, so I have a footnote, you know, describing the Federal Reserve and how it works. And so I'm trying to write something. I'm trying to. The goal of this book is to be a catch-all tool that you can give to somebody who does not know anything about Bitcoin, and they will come out and they'll be fully orange-pilled.
Wow.
Because they'll understand the history, and then they'll understand the solution.
Beautiful.
That's the goal.
And this is for a lay audience.
Absolutely.
Knows nothing about money, finance.
That's absolutely. I mean, no, trust me, I go deep enough into it. I don't just glaze over everything. I mean, I talk about, and there are a couple of chapters that I had some test readers say, boy, this is heavy. You know, I mean, I started, you know, the War of 1812 and how they, you know, they stopped specie redemption, and that led to, you know, the printing of money, et cetera. I mean, some people don't want to hear all that history. Some people love it. Others don't. I said, you can skip chapter 11 and 12 and not miss the thesis of the book. But, you know, the history is there to show how we drifted from a sound money society to an unsound money society. And, you know, I said to you, and I showed you earlier on, that my favorite chart in the book is the chart on page 22, where the inflation chart. And you know, this country was a great country until 1946, and really until 1971. But you know, in 1946, we had won World War II. We were at the top of the world. We were widely admired. We were
put that up right there, but you just see the inflation goes.
It's my favorite chart.
Hockey stick after 1971.
Yeah, going off the gold standard in 1971, as I say in the book, it was galactically stupid.
Yeah, galactically stupid.
It was the famous speech in A Few Good Men with Tom Cruise. I love that quote, and I put it in the book. And you know, it changed everything, and it's only gotten worse. And there's a good Jens Parsons quote in the book where he talks about how the problem with inflation is that by nature it has to get progressively worse to give the same amount of effect. And that's why the math is such that we're now at the stage where, you know, we've continually kicked the can down the road. We're getting to the end of the road, or the can's getting really heavy. Yeah. Depending upon what metaphor you want to use. So
yeah, it is drug or alcohol like, right? I mean, it is. Milton Friedman even used that very analogy.
There's one of the subtitles is the evolution of an alcoholic.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, that's in the inflation chapter.
Yeah. So it's almost literal, basically, right? Like the system is addicted to easy money, which is this illusion that when there are economic problems that you can just print these pieces of paper to resolve it. But that's of course ass backwards, right? Like you actually have to produce more things to consume. You can't just stimulate consumption of that which has not been produced.
Efficiency is what gives greater well-being, not the printing of these units.
Yes, correct. And there's it's deeply intuitive if you really stop and think about it. Like, if you're hungry and you're out of food, like, well, are you going to grow some food or are you going to print some paper? Like, which one's going to put food in your belly? Right. There's only one thing, and it's work, right? It's work, it's savings, investment. Exactly. Not the allocation of it through money, right? Money is just this allocation technology.
That's in there too. I mean, there's a great, story of just, growing eggs and fishing and sharing resources, and how savings is what creates better economic well-being and better economic outcomes. Yes. I mean, remember when Bernanke used to say, we have a savings glut, which he was wrong about. And what we had was a money glut that made it look like we had a savings glut. Yeah. We didn't have a sound money savings glut. And you got to save in order to basically increase societal well-being. And the book takes you through that at a very basic level. And again, it's written to try so that anybody can understand this. You don't need to have any kind of math degree. You don't need to have any kind of financial background. It's simple. It's very simple.
So you've taken your years of knowledge and wisdom about sound money and you're distilling it into something that's very accessible to people.
Correct.
How does your story weave into this?
Well, so
your personal story.
Yeah. So I've just tried to, to make it a little spicier, and because, I'm a little bit of an oddball, and I did some nutty things along the way, and also to add to credibility to it, I just told my own personal story. I mean, the opening scene, if people, I don't want to spoil it, but if people will read it, I mean, I challenged, I spoke truth to power. I mean, I challenged, Tim Geithner at a conference, and said that what they did in '08 was wrong.
Geithner's former
Treasury, Treasury Secretary,
okay, right,
and also was head of the New York Fed during the bailouts in 2008, and basic and that kind of thing. I think people are, you'll read that and you'll think, Jesus, who is this guy? But it was a hook, frankly, to keep people reading. Sure. Because if I opened up with, monetary policy says A, B, C, and D, their eyes are going to glaze over. They're going to, who cares? And then I talk about how, being a gold bug has been hard, and there were times when I was getting kicked in the teeth, and why I was getting kicked in the teeth, and how that led me to lose weight and join CrossFit and get mentally tougher so that I could make it through to see Bitcoin evolve and survive. And I think putting in those personal parts to the story, I think, makes it a little bit more interesting. I mean, it's funny. I mean, the title is very much, obviously those who know, this is a little bit of a playoff on The Big Short, right?
The big print,
same
font.
Right. Exactly. So, and that movie and book did extremely well because it told the story.
Yes.
It told the story of those guys. It showed, Michael Burry, staying up all night and getting the calls from his angry investors and hitting the drums and knowing he was fundamentally right, but being kicked in the teeth. And the same thing happened to me, the exact same thing.
Yeah, and we've talked about this slightly before, but maybe it's worth rehashing a little bit. Like this is pre-Bitcoin, right? You're a gold bug. Yeah. You knew about the problems inside of the financial system, and you were going hard on gold, but gold
didn't work.
You were right, but not at the right time.
Not at the right time. I was right for a while. I mean, it was right from 2000 to 2011, but then they figured out, as I said, in the book, I mean, never underestimate your enemy. I mean, these bastards figured out a way to, by paying interest on excess reserves, all the printing they did in 2008 was sanitized. It didn't turn into inflation. I mean, 2008, I thought we were going to have hyperinflation.
Yeah.
I was dead ass wrong.
It went into asset inflation.
It went into asset inflation. So they created an everything bubble.
Yes.
Right. So that, and that was a very tough time for me. My fund went down enormously from 11 to 15.
Yeah.
I wondered if I was right. I mean, I didn't understand it. I was just, all I did was pray and think to myself, well, there's got to be some reason why I'm suffering through this, because and maybe someday it'll turn out okay and I'll be able to tell the story, or maybe it won't.
Right.
And, I'm going to end up having lost a fair amount of my wealth in this gold trade.
And so in hindsight though, what was the difference, I guess, between 08 and 2020? Because subsequent to 2020, we've seen a lot of inflation.
Oh, yeah. Well,
but 08, it was all asset inflation. So what in your opinion, what have you learned?
Many differences. I mean, they both involve ZIRP, and they both involve
zero interest rate policy.
Yep. Right. They both involved QE, growing the balance sheet,
money
printing.
Yeah.
But in the case of the second time, they did not pay as much interest on the excess reserves, and they also had all the stimmies and the PPP program,
helicopter money.
Right, just blatant helicopter money, large amounts of it. I mean, it was $5 trillion, and the magnitude of it all broke the long deflationary trend. I mean, we've been in a deflationary trend from the early 80s until 2020, and finally it broke. It massively broke because people realized that that there was just 40% more money in the system,
right?
And wages, everything just went up. And of course now, in my opinion, now we are in an inflationary age, and we haven't been able to put that back into the can, and it's only going to get worse. And that's you say earlier, you asked me, why did I write the book? The other reason, Robert, I really wrote the book was to try and help people. I mean, and to warn people, because I think it's an urgent warning. And one of my great fears when I wrote the book was that it wouldn't get out quick enough, that it would happen before the book got out.
Right.
Because I feel like this big print is coming.
Yeah.
And more inflation and more of the problem we're talking about, it's going to get worse. Okay. As we talked about with the alcohol, you just keep drinking more and more. And so as a result of that, I really want to warn people, because I think that, those who are aware of this problem and are taking steps to defend themselves financially, they will be in a different set of conditions in 10 years versus those who are just unaware of it and blissfully ignore it.
Yeah.
Because if it's true that the monetary system does go into the kind of thing I think it might go into, we're going to have a lot of inflation, and those who do not protect themselves are going to be poorer, substantially poorer than those who do.
For sure.
And that's unfortunate. I mean, I hate to see that happen to people, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And so you feel this impetus.
I feel an impetus
do
to kind
something about it.
Yeah, it's like there's a part in the book where I say, it's the chapter that Lynn, and she gave me permission to use her title, Nothing Stops This Train, right? Yeah. There's a chapter in there titled Nothing Stops This Train, just talks about the fiscal train wreck we're going into. And I say in the chapter, I say, there are days I just want to get up on a soapbox and scream to the entire world, we're having a sovereign debt crisis. Don't you get it?
Yeah.
Pay attention now.
Yeah.
I mean, as we're speaking, I mean, here it is. It's February 10th. And, this morning gold was up $46, to a new all-time high of, 2,900 plus. I mean, that's why, right? I mean, it's a signal that,
Yes.
The money is in the money's broken. We know that, fundamentally broken. Yeah. But it's we might be transitioning from the gradually phase into the suddenly phase. I mean, we're kind of at the cusp, in my opinion. So
so let's talk about that.
Yeah.
February 10th, 25. I saw the Fed's reverse repo facility is almost tapped out. So it looks like money printing is about to start again.
It has to.
There's so many problems in the world. Like we've noticed, like a lot of people we know all over the world complaining about rising crime.
Oh, really? Yeah.
That seems to be something that's probably related, right? People becoming more desperate, basically. What do you expect to see over the next 5-10 years as far as the money printing game goes? Do you think we're going into another acute crisis and then we'll have another big QE? Or?
Yeah, I don't want to get too dark. And some people have read The Mandibles. I'm sure you have. And
I haven't read it, but I'm familiar with the thesis.
Yeah. I mean, I hope we don't go there. Yeah. Look, I'm very comfortable saying I think that we have a lot of inflation in the future, and people are going to have to learn to live with that and need to protect themselves from it. How bad? That's debatable. The book talks about kind of probability weightings on all the possible outcomes with respect to inflation. The crime, I think you're right. I mean, I think for the upper 10% of the country, they don't even notice what's going on. They're generally fiat based and doing pretty well. Yeah. I think for the bottom half of the country, everybody is really badly hurting, and even in the middle section, people are pretty badly hurting, and that's sad. I don't interact. I live in a pretty nice area. I don't interact with these people on a daily basis. I have a sister who lives in a rural area that's very middle class, and she tells me the stories, and I'm just horrified by how tough it is for a lot of these people. So where's it going to go? I don't really know. I mean, the best case I think is that we would do a monetary reset of some type. And we would go back to sound money. I mean, if you want to kind of cut to the chase of the quick and correct solution, money being broken has happened in history many, many times over hundreds of years or thousands of years. And when it happens, what happens if a society then decides we are going to go back to money that is not broken, we're going to return to sound money, things will self-organize and get better, much better, quickly. Yeah, really quickly, actually. But that choice has to be made. You can't wish that it's going to happen without making that choice. I mean, you're either on a sound money standard or you're printing and on a fiat standard, and the outcomes under the two are substantially different.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. Well, and it's also a little bit disheartening because we tend to only change when the pain
that's exactly right.
becomes so acute.
Isn't that right? And that's the sad part. I mean, how bad do we have to let this get before we finally have a political crisis and change it? Which is why, by the way, I'm going to send the book to, I'm going to go with Dennis Porter. We're going to march around. We're going to get it to every politician. I'm going to send it to Trump. I'm going to send it to Vance. I'm going to send it to Bissent. Yeah. I mean, look, if we want to get the change before we get to all the pain, what you got to do is buy this book, give it to your neighbors. I mean, we got to turn this thing, and I know this is immodest on my part, but we got to turn this thing into common sense, which Thomas Paine wrote, which basically helped, galvanize the nation over breaking with Britain. Yes. I mean, we've got to get a groundswell of hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions of Americans saying, we got to have sound money.
Yes.
Lepard's book shows you why and proves it.
Yes. Yeah. So you're channeling some Paul Revere energy here, right?
A little bit. I mean, look,
the printing is coming.
To compare me to all those guys is a joke because I'm just like a squirrel looking for a nut. But but my point is, I do feel strongly about this thesis. I mean,
of course.
There's plenty of fight in me for this thesis. Whether we can get this out of the small little Bitcoin community into a nationwide movement, who the hell knows?
Yeah, and so it is an uphill battle, right?
God,
because we have the Keynesian economic paradigm that's been ideologically inserted in all the universities across the world.
Right.
Makes this a blind spot for everyone.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? Like you can't even get this type of education in any mainstream channel.
Again, why I wrote the book, and there's a part in the chapter on the history of economics where I talk about how the Fed has basically bought the economics profession.
Yes,
I mean it's a protection racket. They pay all the monetary scholars to not criticize fiat.
Yes,
if you're an Austrian economist, you can't get a PhD level degree and get a seat as a professor,
right? Because
you're going against the narrative.
Exactly.
I mean, it's so bad. It's so broken. It's so corrupt. It's interesting though. I want to go back to the point you mentioned earlier, the crime thing. There's a part of the book that talks about this. I mean, inflation breaks societies. Inflation ruins societies. And I go through in a detailed way what happened in World War I. So the big inflations in the United States. There was one in 1812. That war, not that big. Civil War was big, really big. Greenbacks, a lot of inflation there. But calm down. We got back on the gold standard in the 1870s. The World War I was a seminal event. Okay, the Fed had just been formed in 1913. War broke out in 1916.
Yeah, what a coincidence.
We printed a ton of money to pay for the war. No surprise, right? And the Fed broke its charter like from day one. No surprise. But the price level basically doubled. From 1916 to 1921, the price level doubled, up 100%. That tore up the society. Ku Klux Klan, all kinds of race riots, all kinds of labor strife and strikes and shutdowns. Okay. Charles Ponzi was 1919, Ponzi scheme, kind of mirrors SBF today, right? Chicago Black Sox, 1919, betting, cheating scandal. I mean, and you can just kind of see how, societies get ruined through bad inflation. And the interesting outcome of all that, of course, is the progressives at the time thought, well, this was all caused by alcohol.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, interesting.
Not that they didn't realize it was the broken money that was causing all these problems. They thought it was alcohol that was causing the problem.
Yeah.
Oh, let's pass the Volstead Act and go dry, and we'll solve it. Which, I mean, look, I don't drink, so I'm not opposed to the Volstead Act per se, but the point is, there was a lot of strife as a result of that. Right?
Yeah. So that's so interesting. Why is this such a blind spot for people? It's like, it seems to be so obvious in a way that it's the thing that we use all the time. And if printing money has this intuitive sense of it's not doing anything good, it's just stealing from you. Why do you think people are so hesitant or reticent to look at the money as the source of the problem? They look to other things like alcohol.
It's a great question. I mean, I think that they get misinformation. And by the way, another optimistic and hopeful part of the book, in the latter book, is how the internet is helping to change all this. I mean, if you've got Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, and the politicians saying, well, yeah, this inflation is all caused by greedy corporations.
Of course.
You listen to that, you believe it.
It's social engineering.
Yeah. And you don't think, no, this inflation is caused by the Federal Reserve and what they've done. That's really the cause. So, I mean, you've got gaslighting and lying coming from all the people who sit in the system and benefit from the system as it now exists. Now, the good news, again, on that topic, the bright news about that is that's getting blown up too, right?
Yeah.
You're doing this. Rogan's doing his thing. Tucker's doing his thing.
Yeah.
We've got alternative news sources.
Decentralized media.
Yeah. We're all starting. I mean, all this, the book talks about this and takes you through kind of a historical tour of how we got centralized. And that was a good thing in general in the beginning, because centralization led to scale, and scale led to cheap stuff. Henry Ford, started the assembly line, and it was great. I mean, we got all these good cars cheap. But 1946 was peak centralization. We figured out how to slaughter 50 million people really efficiently, with gas chambers and bombs and all kinds of shit, right?
Yeah.
And since then, I think at that point in time, what I think happened is we found out there were diseconomies of large scale. Right.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, you can build a big scale industrial economy, but guess what? If Hitler becomes your leader and decides he wants to take over Europe, you're going to see a lot of innocent people get killed.
Yes.
So having that scale economy is dangerous.
Yeah, and he rose from the ashes of the Weimar hyperinflation.
Exactly. Yeah. Another perfect example of how inflation creates perverse outcomes.
Yeah.
Right?
So how do you because this, it's again, one of these things that's very obvious to Bitcoiners or monetary historians. It's a tenuous connection for people that are outside of the space.
Yeah.
How do you approach it? Like if you're talking to someone, obviously the book is a great approach, but if you can't get them to read the book, how do you elevator pitch people on this connection between money and everything else?
Great question. So my elevator pitch is, hey, you're hurting from inflation, right? There's nobody in this country that will argue with that today. Anyone who goes to a supermarket, unless you don't buy your own food, you're hurting from inflation. It's just stunning how bad it is, right? I say, you're hurting from inflation, right? Yep, got it. Okay. Do you really understand the underlying cause and how we got there? And why that doesn't, and that's the other thing. I wrote the book because a lot of people think this is normal. Oh yeah, we're hurting from inflation. But we've always hurt from inflation. It's no, this is just the way of the world. You can't change it, right? And that's where I say, no, stop. You can change it. Yeah. It does not have to be this way.
Right.
There was a long period of time in America when it was not this way. And it's gotten this way. And not only has it gotten this way, but it's gotten this way and it's gotten worse. And so if we return to sound money, we can solve it. And, that's why we need to, even though, monetary stuff may not, dear average citizen, monetary stuff may not be on the top of your mind, but you should learn to think more about it because it's actually a very important issue.
Yeah. And so for sound money in the elevator pitch, you're just telling people this is the thing that doesn't make prices go up.
Exactly.
As much.
That's the elevator pitch. We can stop inflation. It does not have to exist. And then if you want to get a little more into the graduate level, I go into the Jeff Booth thesis, right?
Yeah.
In fact, your TV costs haven't gone up, right? No, this is great. I got a big screen now for $300.
Yeah.
Right. That could be happening in everything.
Yes.
And so that's the dream, but we don't have that because the system doesn't allow us to have that because of the way it's set up. And then I start to go into the politics, and this is where the book differs from Lynn. Lynn came at it from an engineering perspective. It's brilliant, right? I come at it a little bit more from a political perspective, right? Look, Nixon had a choice. Everyone says, well, he had to go off the gold. No, he didn't. No, he could have just said, we're going to revalue gold higher. Now he would have had domestic inflation,
sure,
but he could have let gold float.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And he chose not to.
Yeah.
And so the politics of the matter is, what's happened is the politicians and the big business people, the quintillionaires, the people who know how to make inflation work for them. The other thing in the book, the other chart in the book that I think is very important is the wealth distribution chart in the early going.
You know what page it is?
Yeah, it's right up front. It's under America's Broken. So yeah, if you go to page 20, Robert, what you'll see, it shows the total net worth of the top 1%. So the top 1% now holds 92% of the wealth in this country.
This
It's
is
insane.
page 20,
Page
right?
20, yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay. Total net worth held by the top 1%.
Right.
So there's net worth. Oh, the bottom.
And look at the bottom 50%. It's barely gone up.
Wow.
Right? Yeah.
Okay.
The point.
This chart here.
Yeah. The point being that there are people in society, wealthy people, who actually don't suffer from inflation.
Right.
One, because they got a lot of money, they don't care about the cost of food.
Own a bunch of assets.
And two, they know how to game it. They know how to play the system.
Right.
As I point out, if you can borrow money at 1%, 0%, 2%, 3%, whatever, some low rate, and use it to buy assets that yield a much higher yield,
right,
you're getting ahead.
Yeah, you're a Cantillionaire.
Right. But the rest of us, we don't have that benefit because we can't borrow that cheap. The average human being, the average citizen in the United States, is paying 20-something% for a credit card loan.
Yeah. And this is where things get murky again, because there's this general, what people sort of blame rich people for all these problems. And to some extent, I guess you could argue when they're gaming the system, maybe some of that is proper, but the real problem is not that people are rich. It's that people are being robbed basically through the money, through taxation, through regulation, et cetera.
I have no problem with rich people. I think people who add value honestly and aren't taking advantage of the system, they should be, paid more, earn more, whatever.
Yeah.
But what's happened is it's gotten very, very lopsided.
Yeah.
I like to use the example of, I grew up in Ann Arbor. My father was a shopkeeper. Our neighbor ran Ford Motor Company, right? And the guy did better than my father, but not 400 times better in terms of salary, 5 times better or something. He was running a multinational corporation that was building cars all over the world.
Right.
I mean, there was a middle class in the olden days. And that was another reason for writing the book, that, some of the younger people in the Bitcoin sphere, I don't think understand just how nice and how good it was in this country in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I mean, it wasn't perfect. There was a Vietnam War. There were all kinds of problems. Okay. And we didn't have the technologies we have today. I mean, technologically, today is miles away from then. I mean, it's just so fabulous. I mean, I was in college and I couldn't make long distance phone calls because they were too expensive. Yeah. I had a budget of I could call my parents once a week for 5 minutes. Yeah. Because of the cost of a call. I mean, compare that to today, right? Sure. But in terms of kindness and a middle class and gentility, it was a better country. Right. And it saddens me that we don't have that today. It really saddens me.
The middle class really is the center of gravity for any society. And then this is a very, the word obvious is a little bit dangerous, I guess. It seems pretty clear to me that printing money is going to destroy the middle class, right? For the reasons you just laid out. Right. It's like the people that depend on dollars to hold their value the most, the poor and the middle class, are the ones getting scammed in the money printing, and all that wealth gets reallocated to the top. Exactly. So you're just widening the gap between rich and poor, and therefore making society less stable. Exactly. Why is that so? Like, you can say it in a few words, but for somehow, I guess because we're up against all the Keynesian propaganda,
there's that.
You're just competing with.
Well, there's that, and there's just the general. Look, everyone feels anger about the unfairness of that. Some of us react and go, look, it's not capitalism per se; it's crony capitalism. Others like AOC and Bernie and some of the other people on the left are like, no, these people aren't paying taxes. It's unfair that they're as rich as they are. And fine, that's a piece of it, but that's not really the core piece. The core piece is the uneven playing field. Right. If the playing field were even, it wouldn't be as extreme as it is. Yeah. So.
Well, there'd be nothing to complain about, right? Again, for me, comes back to private property, but again, that's another one of these abstract things that people don't really understand. It's like if you just respect private property, universalize it, and don't violate it, right? Because money printing is a violation of private property, taxation is a violation of private property. Crime is a violation of private property. All of these things. If you don't do that, you get that level playing field. Correct. And then you're having people that can only become rich by serving one another. And that's a world. It's like, you want a lot of rich people. That means they've solved a lot of problems for other people.
Absolutely. Yeah. No. I look at a guy like Hewlett or Packard or people who've invented things and made the world a better place. I'm totally comfortable with them being rich.
Of course. Yeah, because they've made everyone's lives so much better.
Exactly. Yeah.
In Bitcoin, we often dream about the idea of forming citadels, which are independent, self-sovereign communities that have their own energy, food, and water resources. Today, that dream is becoming a reality at the farm at Okefenokee. The farm is a 705-acre regenerative agriculture community located at the Florida-Georgia line near Folkston, Georgia. The farm is known as the healthiest place on earth, and it includes orchards, organic standing gardens, regenerative animal pastures, berry fields, and much, much more. Today, the farm features 25 custom-built cabins and has plans to construct 225 more in the years ahead. The farm has its own food, energy, and water sources and is completely off-grid. So if you're looking to join a Citadel community comprised of sovereign individuals, then go to okefarm.com today to learn more about membership. Make sure to tell them that I sent you for a $21,000 discount on custom cabin pricing. Again, that's okefarm.com to learn more about joining this revolutionary regenerative agriculture community. Forget multivitamins and other supplements. Animal organs are the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. You can get 100 times more nutrients from organs than you can from muscle meats. But the problem with eating organs is that they are difficult to find in stores, they are difficult to prepare, and even when they are prepared well, they often don't taste great. Thankfully, Heart and Soil Supplements has made consuming organ meats so much easier by providing powderized organs in capsule form. Organ meats include everything your body needs to thrive: vitamins, minerals, peptides, proteins, and growth factors. This is why organ meats were the most prized foods for our ancestors. Fortunately for us, Heart and Soil makes these treasured foods easily accessible. So go to heartandsoil.co today and use discount code BREEDLOVE to get started on your journey to optimal health and vitality. Again, that's heartandsoil.co, discount code BREEDLOVE.
Okay, your book does two broad sections, right?
Yeah.
The problem
and the solution.
and the solution.
Yeah.
So obviously, we just had a guy in here the other day that, I don't know if you've seen that video, What's the Problem? Joe Bryan did.
Yeah, I did. I thought it was really good.
Yeah. I thought it was really good too. He really gathered, again, for the normies, he gathered all this whole constellation of societal problems and said, here's all these problems.
Yeah.
And then flowchart connected it to the money, right?
Yeah.
It was actually very useful. Something we're trying to do often.
I agree. It's similar actually to what I've done.
Yeah. So let's do that. Let's do that. Walk us through the problem.
Okay.
And then we'll go into the solution.
Yeah. The fundamental problem is that the money is not sound and that, at every turn, the powers that be, and I put those down as kind of the Fed and large businesses, the government, quintillionaires, change the rules in the system to benefit themselves, and it costs the rest of us. And it's subtle and it's hard to understand, but let's take the 2008 bailout as an example. A lot of people have approached me and said, gosh, Larry, they had to do it. If they hadn't done it, the ATMs would have turned off, the banks would have failed. I mean, those guys were heroes. They saved us. And I'm like, no, they're not. And the book talks about an alternative approach that could have been used, but what they don't understand is, fine, okay, if you're going to have a system where you're going to bail people like that out, then don't complain when gasoline and groceries are more expensive.
Sure.
Because you bailed it out by creating, at a fundamental level, prices, reflect, supply and demand based in a unit of account, and the money in the number of, money units and, monetary units. And so it's quite simple. If you have the same amount of goods and services and you increase the number of monetary units, then people will be able to bid more for each good and service. The price will go up, and that's inflation. Okay, and so this is not a mystical thing. It's not based on greed. It's just based on the way the math works. And so people need to learn to connect the dots between the government does things to bail people out, the wrong people, and therefore the price that we all pay is higher.
Yes.
The government also, it's even more insidious than that though, Robert, because the government also spends money on shit that's not productive. I think one of the other great crimes, post 71, is all the money we've spent on war.
Of course. And
in writing the book, actually, if I had one wish to come for that we go to a Bitcoin standard and everything else, it'd be that we stop war in the world. Yeah. Since 9/11, we've wasted, and in my opinion, I don't care what others say, I believe $8 trillion in the Middle East.
Yeah.
We took over Iraq, and yet now all Iraq does is produce oil for China. Yeah. We captured Afghanistan, we gave it back. Yeah. We've got guys walking around missing limbs with prosthetics, and we've got guys who died. Yeah. Dick Cheney's a 100 millionaire plus. Halliburton did just fine. Thank you very much. And everybody associated with that war machine made a ton of money. Yeah. And yet, we just pissed away $8 trillion, and that's part of the debt that we're now trying to service that's creating the doom loop that we're now in.
And we destroyed ancient civilization over there. Right?
Well, not to mention the innocent people that died in these other countries. There's a part in the book where I talk about Vietnam, where I visited a couple times. And that one I remember from my youth because I was in my teens when that all occurred. And there were hundreds of thousands, arguably even close to 1 million rice farmers that President Nixon carpet bombed in northern Vietnam. Yeah. It's just horrific.
It's fucking genocide. Yeah. We call it war this. It's like, no, it's fucking genocide.
Yeah.
Mechanized mass murder.
It literally is just horrific. Yeah. Yeah. And so, war and money printing kind of go hand in hand. Because, if you think about what wars cost, they're usually so large that you would have to tax the population at 100%. That's right. And population's like, you're taxing me at 100%? I don't think so. Yeah. We're having a revolution here. Right? And so the only way to do it, the only way to finance that is to just dilute the beer, to print more money, and take everyone through inflation.
Yes.
And that's what they do.
Yeah, I've always thought that this would be the one universal thing we could all agree to. It's like war is bad.
Yeah.
You know, so let's fix the money for that reason alone.
Right.
Right.
That's a great reason.
At least shrinks the scale, scope, and severity of war.
Correct.
But again, it's another one of these connections that people consider to be tenuous, even though it's pretty straightforward. You can look at I think we printed $2.8 trillion between 2001 and roughly 2019.
Yes.
And we spent $2.5 trillion on the war on terror. Like
Correct.
It was all printed money.
Pretty much.
So it's not even a question. And then the other side of it too, like all of the propaganda and fake news and fake stories and weapons of mass destruction and mission accomplished, all these lies basically
Right.
that are engineered, right? Social engineering to justify
Yes.
the quote unquote war, when it's really just like history. When the history books are written 200 years, 500 years from now, it's going to be regarded as just another genocide, just another
Correct.
mass murder of one group of people onto another.
Yeah.
There's nothing justified about it whatsoever.
Absolutely.
But we get hypnotized via the media
and our
to believing
political
it's
system.
good.
I mean, my understanding, I could be wrong about this factually, but I believe we have the military people have operations in all states. I mean, there are military. I mean, there are defense contractor operations, I should say.
Yeah.
Well, and guess what? You're in a state, you're a senator, you're a representative, you want full employment, you get large donations from the military industrial complex. What do? You look the other way, right?
It's very pernicious, man.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's not right.
Because you're incentivized to sign up for the scam, basically, right? Like you want jobs, you want employment, you want grants or whatever the thing may be. It's like, and this is where, again, it's weird with the curriculum and ideology too. It's like once you start printing money, you then use the proceeds, the purchasing power you're stealing, to engineer socially engineer people's minds into believing the money printing is good for them, and we need to go to war and we need to do this. It's just like printing money is like mind control in a way.
Yeah, that's an interesting connection I hadn't thought about, but yes, that's right. I mean, it leads to that. Yeah, it definitely leads to that. I mean, look, it's been great for some people. I mean, it's been great for some people.
I agree. It's like, sure, there have been direct beneficiaries of this, right? Like shareholders of the Fed, right? They've been printing money literally forever.
Raytheon shareholders or Dick
defense
Cheney.
contractors.
They're. And you can tell. I mean, there are people that, Max Boot of the Wall Street Journal. There are neocons who have gotten very, very wealthy. By playing that game.
But here's what it's like, yes, they've done well, but what we're not seeing, like Henry Hazlitt's book, The Seen and the Unseen. The unseen is like all of the potential human civilization advancement and prosperity we would have had we not been blowing each other up and stealing from each other and lying to each other.
Yes.
It's like, what would we have achieved had we not done that?
Well, yeah, right? It's yes, exactly. And more importantly, I often say, I mean, think about, and this is where I also talking about this in the book, think about all the technological advances we've had since the 70s, right? Yeah. I mean, we should all be working 40-hour work weeks or 20-hour work weeks and be fabulously rich. Yeah. But we're not, because we've wasted money on this stuff. I mean, that $8 trillion, I mean, if you've been to, I haven't been to China recently, but I have some friends who have, we should have high-speed trains here. Yeah. We should, insofar as we're going to have a large federal government that's going to do things, why doesn't it do things that are productive for us? I mean, why don't we have a nuclear, energy program going in the United States? You know, I mean, China is smart about this. They're doing it. I mean, if you look at all of the large advances, you do any study of this, and Saylor's laid it out brilliantly. If you look at all the large advances that have occurred in society, they occur because people get quantum jumps in how to develop power. Mm-hmm. Nuclear is that next step. Right. And here we are, we're just sitting on it. We're not paying any attention to it.
Yeah.
Right? It's ridiculous.
Not only are they not doing things that are productive, but to the point on war, it's counterproductive.
Oh, absolutely.
You're literally mobilizing people in capital to go and destroy people in capital. And it's like, it's fucking insane. Which gets you all the way back to the metaphor of printing money as like alcoholism or drugs. Yes. Like we're a deranged drug addict basically as a global society.
It's not a bad analogy, and I couldn't agree with you more. No. I mean, I couldn't agree with more. And again, part of why I just felt like somebody had to write this book. Yeah. Somebody had to tell the story and try to explain this. Now, not everyone will be able to connect the dots, And I don't know if the book is going to land a punch or not. I mean, I hope it does. That's, you know, I don't care about how much money I make on the book. I'm doing deals to distribute it worldwide. I just want the goddamn message to get out there. I want as many people as possible to read it and understand it, because I think that's the only way we will ever get control of the system if we, you know, as if we return to sound money.
Yeah, you know, it's so funny. I was thinking about this the other day. Hayek has the famous quote, right?
Yes.
We're never going to get
good
good money
I love
unless we introduce.
That's in the book, by the way. But
unless we introduce. But what did he say? We're never going to get good money
unless we figure out a roundabout, sneaky way for it to be introduced.
Sly roundabout way to separate money from the state. Paraphrasing,
right?
And then I was thinking again, like we also kind of need that with Bitcoin in a way. Maybe we don't need it. I guess Bitcoin's going to work no matter what.
I think it is.
To get people that need to understand Bitcoin, like the poor, the middle class, emerging markets, et cetera, you need this sly roundabout way to, which is like, again, that's kind of the approach you're doing with the book here.
That's kind of what I figured, right? People read stories.
Yes, because if you just say Bitcoin, a lot of people are just alienated from the jump. But if you do this kind of
you say, hey, there's this crazy
subliminal approach.
There's this crazy guy who took on, who took on Geithner, and and I mean, and it's edgy. I mean, the book is edgy. I mean, my wife wanted me to dial some of it back, and I said no.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not very kind to the Federal Reserve. I mean, I think they're kind of an evil outfit.
Yeah.
And I've called it out. And like I say, I mean, I sent one to Joe Kernan. I'm hoping he'll read it. I said, look, Joe, read this, and if you like it, pass it on to Sorkin. If Sorkin reads it, his head's going to explode. And because I mean, that's the kind of channel I want to get onto, and what I just don't know. And we. I've got a really good book publisher, okay?
Yeah.
And she's ex Random House, and she came up with the idea for the title. I was talking about the big print in the book, and she said, no, this should be the title, and she was right. And I've said to her, can we get a major publishing house to do this? And she said, the Overton window hasn't shifted quite enough yet. They're still part of the establishment, Larry. Books are part of the establishment. Simon & Schuster, Random House, etc. She said, it's getting there.
Yeah.
And if you show big sales and you might ultimately get there.
Yeah.
But we're not. She thinks we're not quite there yet. Is kind of her take on it. Right.
Got it. So. And that would have done what for you? Just gives you a lot wider distribution.
It just gets you wider distribution. Yeah. I mean, it'll get you in the airports.
Gotcha.
Right now, I'm on Amazon. I'm on Bitcoin Infinity Store. Yeah. But I'm not in the airports. And that's what you want. You want the person who's going to hop on a plane, sees it on the stand, goes, "Gosh, that's interesting. I wonder what that's all about."
Yeah.
They read it and they go, "Oh my goodness," Again, the book was written I want the average person to read it and go, oh my God, I understand why I'm getting screwed, and I understand what I have to do about it.
Yes.
That's the one line pitch.
Yes.
And so if I can get the airport guy or girl to pick it up and read it on a flight, because it's probably 8 to 10 hours of reading.
Yeah.
Read it on a flight, I'll say, oh my goodness, and say, I got to give this to my friends.
Amazing. Yeah.
That's how we're going to get the world, right?
Let's talk about, so, I mean, we've already hit on this a little bit, but like, just to really emphasize the point, there's the old saying, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, right? I don't know that, again, it's an adage, like it's the natural order of things, but it's not the natural order of things.
Doesn't have to be.
No, this system specifically, the central banking system, seems to be a primary driver of that dynamic.
Correct.
How someone that is poor, someone that doesn't understand any of this, how can we explain to them that they are the victims in this scheme, that the poor, or anyone depending on fixed income for that matter, is disproportionately impacted negatively by central banking and fiat currency?
I think the easiest way to do it is to point out to them how there are two sets of rules. One set of rules for them, one set of rules for the rich and powerful, okay? And the set of rules for them are, you want to borrow money? Great. Go get a credit card and you got to pay 25%. I mean, we used to have usury laws that capped that at 10 or 12, but we don't anymore because those all got abolished, okay? You're rich and you want to borrow money? Yeah, you can borrow it at prime, which has been as low as 0 and now is in the 4 or 5 range, So, and you might say, why does that matter? Well, it matters because if you are able to borrow money and buy an asset that yields more than what you're borrowing, you're getting richer. So that method of making wealth is just taken away from everybody who's not at a certain level, wealth. So that's unfair.
So you can benefit from the money printing when you're at a certain. Basically, it's like you can borrow the money when you don't need the money and use it to extract more wealth.
Correct.
But when you don't have the money and need to borrow the money, you're just going to get crushed.
Tough darts.
Yeah,
tough darts.
It's apartheid.
Yeah,
economic apartheid.
It kind of. Yeah, that's a way of looking at it. Yeah. Another way of looking at it is to say, when new money comes into the system, the people who borrow it and the people who are in the system and know how to take advantage of it can buy, this is Cantillionaire, can buy things before the prices go up.
Yeah.
So let's just take an example, new money comes into the system, the people who get that new money or have access to that credit or new money first are able to buy goods and services at the old price. And then that extra demand from that new money pushes those prices up, which the working man or woman has to absorb and pay. But they never got any of that new money.
Right.
So they're paying a higher price for that other man getting rich.
Right. Yeah. So it is an actual shell game, basically, right? Like you've just moved wealth out of one set of hands into another set of hands.
Right.
The mechanism is the price increase, right?
Right.
This person's savings now buys them less goods and services.
Correct.
Whereas this person's savings gets them more goods and services.
More goods and services. Yeah. It's that simple, really. I mean, it's incredibly unfair. And again, that chart that I showed you on the wealth inequality, you can see how it got worse when they took interest rates down to 1% in 2003. Then it got worse again in following 2008. Then it got even worse still in 2020.
Yes.
This is back to the alcoholic.
This is the exponential kind of curve.
This is why nothing stops this train. This is why mathematically we're running towards a crack, a break in the system.
Yes.
And I feel very strongly about that. And again, another reason why I wrote the book was, I was very afraid I wouldn't get the book out in time because I mean the big print is coming. Okay, in my view, the next one's coming. Yeah. And so I'm thinking, oh shit, if it comes before I print the book, I'm going to look like an idiot. Yeah. Thankfully, I got the book out before the big prints happen. But it's gonna happen because it has to happen mathematically, Robert. It just has to.
Yes.
The system will collapse if we don't continue to expand the money supply. If we don't continue the inflation, and in fact, continue the inflation getting worse with each event.
Yes.
I mean, a good example, in the 2008 example, as the Fed balance sheet pre-2008 was $900 billion, right? It went up to like 3.4, came back down a little after that. And that took, a bunch of rounds of QE 1, 2, and 3, which we called QE infinity. It took a bunch of rounds of QE, and, it was over a period of from 2008 to 13, 14, something like that. So it was a bunch of years. Well, 2020, we did more in like a third of the time, right? I mean, 2020 hit it, 2019, 2020, and we went from, a balance sheet had been reduced back down to 2.9 or 3. We went up to a peak of $9 trillion. I mean, we printed $6 trillion worth of money, and they did it in less than 2 years.
Yeah.
Which caused the M2 supply to go up 40%. I mean, I like another tweet that I've seen very common recently, which is, when they printed 40% of the money supply in 2 years in COVID, imagine you had worked your entire life, all of your savings, every year you diligently put away money and saved, and then they just inflated away 40% of that in 2 years. Gone.
Time theft.
Just gone.
Yeah.
You just spent, you're a working person and you'd save $400,000, say, over the course of, just working away and putting away your savings year after year after year, right? And then suddenly this event comes along, and that 400 only has, 250 of purchasing power because 40% of it just got taken away.
Because somebody pressed a button.
Somebody pressed a printing button.
It's crazy, right?
Right? And that's to put it in terms I think people can understand, that's what's going on.
Yeah.
And it's just so wrong. It's so sad and so unfair.
It is.
And that's why somebody had to say something about it. I mean, somebody had to write a book about this shit, right?
And you've done a great job.
And I did. Yeah. I don't know if this is the book, I think it's as good a book as I will say this is as good a book as I could do. I don't know if this book will do what I want it to do.
Sure.
But I couldn't do a better book than this.
Well, I know. I'm very sure that you've done a great job because I know you're hard working. I know you know this stuff really well. This is another one of those connections. This one's not so obvious.
Okay.
But it is probably the most important one, right? Like I think this was in the Gold Wars. He said that the monetary standard and the moral standard are inexorably linked.
Yes.
Right? There's like a very Ayn Rand has said this too, like money is the barometer of a society's moral virtue. You know,
I think that's right.
There is this deep moral component to money that almost no one has any appreciation of whatsoever.
Totally agree.
If anything, they often misquote the biblical passage and say money is the root of all evil.
Yes.
When it actually says the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, which that makes sense, right? If you love money, well then you're exactly. You're idolizing something.
The wrong thing.
Right?
Yeah. Money's a tool.
Exactly. Money's a tool. Right? It's like loving, I don't know, glass jars or something. Like, doesn't really make sense. So how do you approach the connection between money and morality, and what is it about money printing that has steered us the wrong direction from a moral standpoint?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I direct everyone who's listening to the chapter on sound money. Sound money is a moral issue, page 41. And this has been around a long time. You know, people have often wanted to fool with money, with the monetary standard. And money is just a shared illusion. It's what we all agree is the intermediate good that has value. And this is what, the early Austrians said, Menger particularly. And, the Bible talked about it, obviously, sound money and honest weights and measures. People were talking about, they were doing transactions, and if you thought if you bought an ounce or whatever the unit of measure was back then, you wanted to get a real ounce, not a half an ounce, not a third of an ounce. And it's a way. I mean, it's a way to cheat. Cheating on the money is a way to cheat. It brought down the Roman Empire. The denarius was originally all silver. It was the soundest currency of the time. It was the largest empire of the time. And over the course of the life of that empire, it became the content in the denarius was zero. Silver content was zero. And you could almost track the decline of Rome with the decline of the sound money. So it's an indicator of people's willing to be honest with each other. And honesty is essential for human cooperation, because if people are dishonest, then trust is lost. If trust is lost, if I can't trust you to do something, you can't trust me to do something, then things don't get done.
Sure.
We all, and there's a certain level of honesty that exists in society. I mean, we all trust that airplane pilots are well-trained and understand the responsibility they hold, and they're responsible for hundreds of lives, and they're not going to drink, and they can't screw up, and they're going to do their job honestly, and that's essential. And the minute you start to fool with the money, and maybe even say that fooling with the money is okay, and maybe even say that gambling is okay, you introduce an entire different way of behaving that becomes, well, just how can I get the most that I can get, and devil take the hindmost is kind of the phrase, the idiom from the 1500s that I put in the book. And so it's problematic. I mean, there's a good Tody Deden quote in there. He's a fund manager in Switzerland that says, dishonest money leads to dishonest everything. Yes. Politics, morals, the works. It spreads. And so, if you've got, I think Ron Paul said something, if the government is running a Ponzi scheme, which they are, they basically print more money to pay for the things they can't support, then why doesn't everybody else think they're allowed to run a Ponzi scheme too?
Yes.
And so, if you have a form of dishonesty in the underlying base layer, the most important thing, I would argue money, as you pointed out, it is the most important thing in the economy. It defines everything. And so if you decide you're going to play around with a rubber money standard, how can it work?
Right.
I mean, there's another great quote in the book by Nathan Lewis talking about how if two people are going to coordinate to create a piece of a machine tool that's 500 millimeters long, that's going to do a piece of work, and suddenly the definition of a millimeter is varying by 5% a year or 2% a year, the guy making the piece of the part is going to mismeasure it. It's going to give it to the guy who wants to use the part. The guy who wants to use it is not going to be able to use it because it doesn't fit.
Yes.
And all of the benefit associated with having truth, is lost. And this is, by the way, I mean, this segues nicely into the beauty of Bitcoin, because it's a mathematical proof machine.
Yeah.
It's mathematical truth. And I mean, it's just like, when I first grokked that, it was like my mind was blown. Do you know what I mean? Like, holy shit. We've suffered thousands of years of human beings living with money that was varying degrees of unsound. Admittedly, gold was pretty sound, but it diluted 1.7% a year, and over 50 some odd years, the supply would double. So there was deflection even in gold. But now we have a form of money with zero dilution, zero. I mean, deflection. I mean, a little bit now as we're at 9.7 or 8 going to 21, but quite small. And at 21.40, it will be zero. So,
well, it's effectively zero because you already know it, right?
That's true.
It's the unknown component.
Actually,
right?
that's true.
Yeah,
like even though we've got some more supply to come,
yes,
it's on a very set schedule.
Right. Like when you look at a cap table and you look at it on a fully diluted basis.
Yes.
These are all the possible shares that will ever be issued. This is all the dilution you will ever incur.
We've got that.
We have that.
We have that. Right.
Yeah.
So to me, that's it's so different and so unique and so powerful. That the monetary lie is about to disappear.
Yes.
And it's so hopeful and so, I mean, it's friggin' fabulous, right?
Yeah.
I mean, all the bad shit we were talking about before, it's all going to go away.
Yes.
It's really, I mean, that's the positive part of this whole thing. I mean, I see people hurting from the system as it is, and that's a real bummer.
Yeah.
It's a real bummer, but and the first half of the book takes you through. I mean, I've had some people DM me about the book who've read it, and they said, good God, I had no idea. I mean, I've got some really great case stories of bad fiat behavior, you know, and they're like, oh my God, this shit is even more broken than I thought. I mean, as we're now watching DOGE, unearth some of the crazy shit that the government's spending money on, right?
Of course.
I mean, it's no surprise. I mean, fiat leads to a lot of really stupid shit.
Yes.
But, guess what? When we go to non-fiat, sound money, I mean, I think people are going to be blown away with how much better it all gets.
Yeah.
It's really going to be something. And at least that's my hope, and I believe it.
Yeah, I agree completely. And this point of standards is so important, right?
Yes.
Like we're doing it with language, right?
Yes.
We try to standardize around how you understand a word and how I understand a word, and that's how we have dialogue.
Right.
This idea of the metric system, or like as you said, those things standard, like it doesn't change. It needs to be immutable so that you can collaborate and coordinate with people across in different places and at different times, right?
Sure.
Like when I order the 500 millimeter piece in 2007, it better be the same 500 millimeter piece in 2012, right?
Right.
If it's fluctuated, then my components are not going to work together.
Exactly.
So all economic coordination collapses. And the same is true with the money, right? We need standardization so that we can have clarity of communication.
Correct.
And somehow, and it is, you've done a good job explaining it, but we use the term moral standards, right?
Right.
Somehow that is related to these like mathematical measurement standards as well.
I think it is because I think the minute it gets fishy, or fluctuates.
Yeah.
We know man has fallen, mankind has fallen.
Yeah.
The minute it fluctuates, people are going to try and figure out how to make it fluctuate in their own benefit.
Of course.
Exactly. It's just as natural as can be.
Start gaming the system, basically.
Of course they will. Yeah, of course they will. And then, and this has been a very sophisticated game that the wealthy have played on us. Do you know what I mean? And the insiders, I should say, have played us, because not all the wealthy are bad. But those who support and benefit from this system, in my opinion, they are not behaving ethically.
Yeah, it's difficult to circumscribe a group. Right, I would often say the shareholders of central banks, but to your earlier point, even people that are borrowing money at below market rates and using that to acquire assets, like they're sort of
and by the way, I mean, and I even made this point in the book. I said, look, not every fiat lord is a evil person intrinsically.
Sure.
Some are they're just playing the game in a way that
they're
they
following
think,
their incentives.
Yeah, exactly. That they think it should be played. Now, some of them, I mean, I think are legitimately evil. I mean, I think a guy like Bernanke, who says he wasn't printing money, who lies about the interpretation of the Great Depression, who's probably getting a huge salary now from Citadel, for supporting them, during the many years when he helped them to become rich. I mean, I think there's a guy who is legitimately evil, but and there are others as well, but I would say, some of the other people, they're just playing the game,
sure, and
they're playing it in a way so that they can win. I think once they read this book, they might think, gee, he has a point. Maybe the game is a little crooked, and maybe we should make the game fairer. And that's all I really want. And I think it's so deep inside mankind and human beings. And if you look at all of the religious texts and traditions and everything else, human beings want fairness. We just want fairness. Sure. I mean, the average person, I don't think anybody, I mean, some don't, some want to cheat. Some want to get ahead no matter what.
Right.
But I think the average human being, you just want fairness.
Yeah.
You just give me a level playing field, give me some fair referees. I'll play the game. That's all good. I mean, and I think that's why the book might resonate. I mean, I point out how, the game's not fair.
Yeah.
It's just not fair. And no wonder why people are pissed.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And you see that, I mean, with any game that humans play, right? If you can just arbitrarily change the rules if we're playing poker and I get to decide what the hand rankings are every hand, it's like, well, I'm going to win every fucking hand.
Exactly.
And you're never going to want to play. Right. So there's no game. If the rules aren't immutable and stable, then there is no game. It becomes like a political struggle.
Not a fair game. Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not even... Yeah, it's not fair, and therefore it becomes not a game because the other player doesn't want to play an unfair game, right?
Right, exactly. Well, once you realize you're the sucker at the table, you just say, "I'm going to get up and leave."
Exactly, exactly. Right. And then, further it's like, okay, if it's unfair, that's one thing. But then if it's unfair and then subject to further fluctuation, it's like, well, then we can never develop a stable strategy or do any planning at all because we don't know what the rules are going to be.
Right.
And that's essentially the monetary system we're living in today.
Correct.
It's like you just basically don't know what the rules will ever be.
Correct.
So everyone's on the take. Everyone's playing political games.
Yep.
Rather than just playing economic games.
Right. And the economic game should be, how do we allocate this capital effectively to make lives better for everybody?
Solve problems.
Solve problems. Yeah,
exactly.
If the money is appropriately priced, people will make the right decisions.
Yes.
And I think it would be stunning how much better we would all live. I think it would be stunning. I really do.
Yeah.
There wouldn't be the waste of resources in the things that we waste resources in now. I mean, just a perfect example. Let's take the lottery, for example, okay? The lottery makes absolutely no sense. We all know it's a game where you can't, I mean, somebody's going to win it, right? Mm-hmm. But statistically, no poor person should ever dump any dollars into the lottery, full stop, right?
Yeah.
But they do because they feel so helpless in the existing system. And it's like the only, it gives them some sense of hope.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes, 100%.
They know the thing is rigged. They know they can't get ahead. Yeah. And they say, to hell with it. Screw it. Yeah. Screw it. Yeah, I'm going to throw this Hail Mary. Yeah. I'm buying that $2 ticket and maybe my life will get better.
Yeah. And the sick, twisted part is the winner in the lottery is always the state because they're always taking 50% of that.
Well, there's that
pool, right?
Yeah. And the other winner is that a lot of the people who end up ultimately winning it end up ruining their lives because they don't know how to handle it, and then it's like it's a blessing and a curse, right?
Yeah.
I mean, frankly, I think they should just be outlawed, but that's just me. I'm kind of a Puritan on that sort of stuff. But
yeah, I mean, I don't think at least should be. It's a regressive tax, basically, right?
Very much so. Poor. Yeah, very much so. I mean, I think gambling. If people want to gamble, let them. But to me, that's not a productive use of people's time or effort. You know what I mean? It's just not.
Yeah, I completely agree. And the fact that it's state sponsored just makes it more problematic. There's just more moral hazard there.
Yeah.
And this is one of the most interesting areas of money for me. It's like there is this, all human interaction is game-like in that we're moving towards objectives.
Right.
And we're operating within the boundaries of some rules, right? Even if that's just the laws of physics and we're trying to move from point A to point B. There's still
faster.
There's still like this game-like design. So when you start to look at it like that, it's like, okay, well, all human interaction is game-like. This level playing field idea is like extremely important. It's like the most important thing there is.
Yeah.
Because if you have this uneven playing field, this fluctuating playing field, then it's just chaos, right? People are just really trying to fight to get into the position of power to make or change the rules.
Right.
Because if I can make or change the rules, then I can win every hand.
Right.
So, but if I eliminate that possibility, then my only alternative is to play the game to try and get fairly.
Yes.
According to the same rules as everyone else. So getting rid of this rules for thee and not for me dynamic is like one of the core value propositions of Bitcoin.
Correct.
Yeah.
Nobody has an advantage.
Yes,
we're all,
exactly.
I mean, I was interacting with somebody on Twitter yesterday, and they said, "Well, this is really unfair because all the people, early hodlers, are going to be incredibly rich." And I said, "Hang on a second. Yeah. It's an open market. It's a fair system. It's based on math. Yeah. You had the opportunity to buy when they did.
Yeah.
Don't begrudge them the fact that they bought it and you didn't. Yeah. You have the opportunity to buy it now or not. Figure out what you want to do and do it or not do it."
And they took greater risk.
Yeah, they took much greater risk.
Greater reward.
And they're going to get greater reward. I mean, the other thing on that, we could touch on it because I think people might be interested in it. And I tried to touch on this in the book, but this thought came to me after I wrote the book that a lot of people now look at Bitcoin at 100,000. They say, well, it's too expensive. I mean, I have a lot of friends. I have a lot of wealthy friends who feel this way.
Unit bias.
Yeah, you bought it at 10. You bought it at 5. You know, I can't pay that much. And I said, okay, let's frame this in a slightly different way. The monetary system is the Titanic. Okay, and I'm taking this from a guy who DM'd me this on Twitter, so this is not my original idea, and I can't remember his name. He didn't want to be doxxed, so he wouldn't give me his name. But anyway, the monetary system is the Titanic, right? Okay, yeah. So I bought some seats for $5,000 and $10,000 and $400 and $400. I mean, I bought all my earlier seats, right? Okay, fine, and I'm done buying. Okay, it's $100,000 to you. Do you want a seat? You know. Your choice. You say, no, I don't want a seat, or you can buy one. And it's just, the seats have gotten more expensive, no doubt. But if it is the Titanic, I think you want a seat on the lifeboat, you know?
Oh, yeah, buying seats on the lifeboat. Got it. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, again, there's this illusion that people think, it's part of American exceptionalism, I guess. They just think the dollar is and always will be.
Yeah.
And I'm like, guys, open a fucking monetary history book. Like, show me one example where that's ever happened.
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
It's never happened.
Yeah.
They all die. It's either hyperinflation or you get conquered.
Yeah, and the issue is just over what period of time and when. And I mean, and a lot of us have had that wrong. I mean, in the book I talk about how I had it very wrong in 2008.
Sure.
And I may have it wrong now. I mean, this could take 5 years.
But directionally, you're correct.
I think so.
There's almost no question.
Look at
the U.S. as a fiat currency. So long as it's a fiat currency, it will go the way of fiat currencies at some point.
Right. And it has lost a lot of value. I mean, gold has lost, the dollar's lost 98.5% of its value.
Have you ever wanted to start a business in the Bitcoin space? If so, then the Wolf Startup Accelerator could be for you. Wolf is the first startup accelerator dedicated exclusively to businesses developing in the Bitcoin Lightning Network. 4 times each year, Wolf brings teams from around the world to New York City to work with like-minded entrepreneurs, pushing the boundaries of what's possible with Bitcoin and Lightning. The program is designed to help early-stage companies achieve product-market fit, develop their brand, secure early-stage funding, and grow businesses that fuel the global adoption of Bitcoin. Go to wolfnyc.com to learn more or apply today. Again, that's Wolf, WOLF, NYC.com. Would you rather have 1 Bitcoin today or 2 Bitcoin a few years from now? Bitcoin mining is a tried and true strategy for accumulating Bitcoin. Over a 2 to 4 year time frame, successful miners have consistently accumulated more Bitcoin than they otherwise would with a traditional dollar cost average strategy. Blockware's mining as a service enables you to start mining Bitcoin from your laptop. Blockware handles everything from securing the miners to sourcing low-cost power to configuring the mining pool. They do it all. Plus, with Blockware's one-of-a-kind mining marketplace, you can buy and sell live Bitcoin miners with just a few strokes of the keyboard. In this marketplace, buyers get to purchase live machines at vetted facilities, enabling them to mine with zero lead time. And sellers get the opportunity to liquidate their machines and hosting contracts at will. This means you can mine Bitcoin with zero long-term commitment and high liquidity on your mining rigs. Blockware will even cover your miner's energy bill for the first week of each of your mining rigs when you sign up at mining.blockwaresolutions.com/breedlove. Again, that's 1 free week of Bitcoin mining at mining.blockwaresolutions.com/breedlove. We're talking about games, talking about the importance of the stability and predictability of rules across time, leading to fair play, peaceful competition, cooperation, etc. I think this is a good time to talk about, one of the very important angles on Bitcoin is that it is the solution, the only solution we've ever discovered to a computer science problem that went long unsolved. It was decades, and it was considered to be unsolvable, I think, by many. And that is the Byzantine generals problem. And so you may have heard of the telephone game, right? Where like you call someone on the telephone, you give them a message, and they pass it to someone else on the telephone. And by the time it goes through this big loop across all these telephone connected individuals, by the time the message gets back to you, it's a distorted message, right? The message has changed because people sort of change it at the edges as it goes. That's sort of like the Byzantine generals problem. In more specific language, it's how do you pass a message into this network of
actors that can't trust one another.
Correct.
May even be antagonistic towards one another, so they may want to deceive one another. How do you pass a message in one end of that network and get the message out the other end of the network such that the message is the same going in as it is coming out? And this was long considered to be an unsolvable computer science problem because it's something that occurs at the social layer.
Right.
You can't trust these individuals to not distort the message. So prior to Bitcoin, there was widely believed to be no way to solve that.
Right.
Because it's a social layer problem, not a computer layer problem.
Right.
But lo and behold, we get Bitcoin and it solves this thing.
Right.
And we do have this way to propagate these messages now across, the world, right?
Right.
In a way that Bitcoin doesn't distort at all, right? Like a
Correct.
Bitcoin cent, there's no double spending, there's no counterfeiting, there's no distortion of the message. It's written in permanence on the time chain. So I'm just curious, like what, and then what we were talking about too, this is an interesting take on it. This might be a little bit in the theoretical domain. This came from conversations I'd had with Obi in the past.
Sure. Yeah, I like Obi.
And just the idea of like, how do you stop Bitcoin? And the one very viable theory was that at some point you would have needed all the nation states in the world to coordinate all of their actions in lockstep against Bitcoin, right? They would need to outlaw it. They would need to, propagandize against it. They'd probably need to jail Bitcoiners, tax it, regulate it, attack it, whatever. But all the nation states would need to do it all at once and all the same way. Like they'd need, in other words, nation states would need to solve their own Byzantine generals problem. How do we coordinate all of our actions in lockstep?
Good luck.
And well, again, there's no solution to that problem other than Bitcoin. So what the prediction is, well, nation states aren't going to do that because they can't do that. They can't trust one another. So what will they ultimately do? They'll buy Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And here we are, 2025.
Here we are, and they're buying Bitcoin.
Nation states are buying Bitcoin.
Yeah, they have to. I mean, just like Larry Fink's buying Bitcoin. I mean,
yes.
He was a fiat lord, but he realized that this is going to happen with him or without him, and he'd rather be a part of it and make money than ignore it and get fired like the Vanguard guy did.
Exactly.
But yeah, no, the technical innovation here, it's just stunning.
Yeah.
It's absolutely stunning. As we talked about earlier, money has always deflected. Here we have mathematically formed, algorithmically formed, consensus formed money that can't deflect. It can't be diluted. It's a huge, huge technical achievement.
Yeah.
And that's sadly what I think so many people are missing. People who aren't aware of it and aren't thinking hard about it, or who are distracted by all the crypto fraud and noise. Another point I make in the book that I'd like to make with you, because I think it's an important point for people to understand, is how the rules of investing have changed with Metcalfe's law and networks. And I actually this kind of came to me as I was writing the book, because I started doing some research. And so I was trained in traditional investment theory, Graham and Dodd, buy things cheap, buy them when they're growing, peg ratios, all that kind of stuff, PEs, multiples of cash flow. And that's what you get when you go to business school, and that's what you get when you're a professional investor, and you look at Sharpe ratios and so forth. And then I started studying what's happened since these networks have emerged, principally the internet. Really the internet only, although there were some network businesses before that. And what I saw just kind of blew my mind. I mean, as you know, Metcalfe's law is that the value of a network grows at the square of its underlying user growth. And so what happens in these networking businesses, they get incredibly valuable incredibly quickly. So that if you go and you look at Google from IPO to today, it's up 9,000%. Or if you go and you look at Amazon from IPO until today, it's up 218,000%. Facebook, similar kind of numbers. And I went back and I looked at some leading companies like General Motors. It's been around a long time. And General Motors is up 400% from 1916 to present. Okay. But I mean, first of all, that's 50 odd years plus or more. It's 60, 70 years, whatever. But I mean, here we are in 20 years since the internet was founded. We have some network businesses that have increased by thousands of percent.
Right.
This breaks all traditional investing models.
Yes.
Okay. You're trained to buy things on a PE basis. Forget about it. And so I missed this. So when and I talk about this in the book, when I was looking, I was doing growth at a reasonable price investing during this whole time frame, and I would look at something like an Amazon, or I would look at something like a Facebook, or I would look at a Google, and I would say, that's interesting. It's growing nicely, but They're not making that much money, and the multiples are crazy. People are paying insane multiples of earnings, or even there are no earnings in Amazon's case, right? I said, I can't do it. It's just not, it doesn't fit my model, right? Boy, what a mistake that was, right?
Yeah.
Because I didn't understand the way this new networking model changes the math of making these kinds of investments. And so, again, part of the reason I wrote the book and part of what really, resonated with me is, okay, granted, I miss these network businesses that were growing off of the internet. I'm not going to miss this one.
Yes,
right? Here we got the same thing. And by the way, this is better than Amazon. It's better than Google, because we're not just talking Google's, information and search. Amazon is, Walmart online and things.
Yeah.
This money touches everything.
Right.
Absolutely. I mean, there's nothing in the world that doesn't happen without money. If Satoshis become the base layer of money, which I sincerely believe will happen, don't know the time scale, but I believe it will happen, these things are going to be so valuable, people's heads are going to spin.
Yeah.
And so, I just felt like I wanted to try and point that out in the book to people thinking about this as an investment. You just don't want to miss it.
Yeah.
And I get people's fears about it. And I have my client base in my investment management business is on the older side in general. And, they're skeptical, understandably. And I'm like, okay, fine. I get it. I'm not suggesting you take 100% of your money and put it in Bitcoin. But what I am suggesting is you can afford to put 1%, 5%, 10%. You can afford that.
Yeah.
Even if I'm wrong and it goes to zero, it's not going to change your lifestyle. And if I'm right and it does a 10 bagger and then another 10 bagger and then another 10 bagger,
It's going to improve
you're
your
going to
lifestyle.
be you're going to be really glad you did it, right?
Yeah.
Just like, the people who bought it at 10,000 are very glad they have it now at 100. Well, I think in 5 years it's going to be worth $1 million, and if you didn't buy it at 100, you're going to have regret. So
Exactly.
I just think it's a point that's important to make.
No, it's very important. And this whole idea of us conforming our models to the current technological paradigm makes us blind when the tech paradigm changes.
Well, that's right.
Right?
And I mean, they say there is nothing new under the sun, but sometimes there is.
There
I mean,
is.
in
Of
technology,
course. Yeah.
there actually is. I mean, these things did not exist.
That's the defining feature of technology.
Right.
There's always something new under the sun.
Well, that's exactly right. Yeah. I mean, and it's funny. I was at a conference. I talked to James Grant, who's a great, monetary scholar, and runs a conference. He's a gold guy. And I said to him, I said, James, by Menger's definition, this stuff's turning into money. You gotta learn to respect it. You gotta take a look at it. He said, come back to me when you've been around for 1,000 years. And I said, James, I said, wait a minute. You mean to tell me that when commercial air flight became available, you didn't accept it because it hadn't been around for 1,000 years?
Right.
I mean, once it became, it was dangerous in the early days, but once commercial air flight became safe, it was just a better way of doing things, and you used it. That's what this is. It's a better technology, and so you're going to use it because it makes sense. It improves upon what existed before, right?
Amen to that. Yeah, and we're all grasping at analogies here to try to describe the profundity of this thing.
Right.
The one that I went for was the number 0, right? Like you needed this. There was this idea that was just so useful, and it made computation better, faster, cheaper, less prone to error for merchants, right? If you use a zero-based numeral system versus not. So like it's an idea that gives you a distinct competitive advantage.
I see.
Right. And so Bitcoin's sort of like that. Like it's just an idea. Obviously, it's an idea that's rooted into reality through proof of work mining.
Right.
Whereas number 0 is a bit more on the abstract side. Something like commercial airlining is a bit more on the tangible side, right? Bitcoin's somewhere in between, right? But ultimately, it's like, how do you stop that really useful idea? Because if it just does the job better than other ideas, then it's going to spread.
That's exactly right. And I don't see it. I mean, and so when people say it's going to 0 or it's not, I'm saying, tell me what's going to make that happen. I just don't see it.
When people tell me it's going to 0, I'm like, no, it's much more akin to 0. Actually, you need to
in terms of an innovation.
Yes. And just back on the game theory topic, there's this saying by, I won't even attribute it. It's a guy that wrote on the philosophy of war. His last name's Schmidt. I don't like to attribute quotes anymore because I get them wrong all the time, but I'm pretty sure I'm right about this one. Carl Schmidt. He said, sovereign is he who decides the exception.
Yes.
Right? So again, if you get to decide the exception to the rules, then you're sovereign over everyone playing that game.
Yeah, that's a fact.
And that's basically what a central bank is doing. It's just picking winners and losers. It's doling out the points of the game, these economic games. Therefore, it's corrupting the game, degenerating the game. Well, what is Bitcoin? It's just the game that nobody can game.
Correct.
Right? It's the game where since no one can make an exception, it makes everyone sovereign.
Correct.
Basically.
The nodes are sovereign.
Yes.
All of them.
Right.
And
yes.
Yeah, they can propose a change. If the nodes don't accept it, it doesn't change.
Yeah, or again, it's a bit paradoxical. You could also say, since no one can make an exception, no one's sovereign. But when you say no one's sovereign, it's the same thing as saying everyone's sovereign.
Yeah,
exactly.
same thing.
So it's like the importance of that. When you understand that everything we do, all the interactions we have, are game-like.
Yes.
Most of them are denominated in money, right? Or
No,
points.
that's a really good analogy, and I had not thought of it in those terms. I mean, it's a game.
Yeah, it's a game.
Money is a game.
It's a game.
And the Fed controls it.
And they game it.
And they game it.
The Fed games it.
Yeah,
So
I mean, Bill Ackman calls up and says, the banking system's going to fail if you don't bail out Silicon Valley Bank.
Yeah.
And guess what? Silicon Valley Bank gets bailed out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Picking winners and losers.
Yeah. And all the venture capitalists who had all their money in Silicon Valley Bank, who should have taken a 20% haircut, by the way, if we had followed Black Dot and the law, they got bailed out.
Yes.
Yeah. And by the way, that costs everybody, in terms of gasoline and groceries.
Of course.
Right.
Yeah. All the cost of that failure get externalized.
Yeah. I mean, spread out.
Yeah.
It's just a few pennies to everybody, but you add it all up and right? A few pennies
make a pile.
Yeah, it adds up.
Yeah. So you've said this today already, and it's also in the book, right? That it's irrefutable that we're heading into a sovereign debt crisis, or we're in one.
I believe we are.
Yeah. So why do you consider that to be so certain?
Yeah.
And what are the variables in the equation that prove the point?
It's a great question, and I don't know when it's going to happen. I don't know exactly how it's going to happen. Nobody does. Anyone who tells you does is full of shit.
Right.
But it's math. It's just simple math, and it's thousands of years of history of watching this kind of math play out. And the math is as follows: if you are growing the debt faster than you're growing the underlying GDP, and this used to be my pin chart on my Twitter feed. I took it down because I've now got the book up there. But eventually the gap between the two.
Oh, this is the red line, blue line thing.
Yes.
Yeah,
eventually the gap between the two becomes so large. The GDP is what provides the money to pay interest and principal on the debt.
Right.
You grow the debt at 8%, which is what we've done. Grow the debt at 4%, or the GDP at 4%, which is what we've done, 4.4 or something. And guess what? That gap eventually gets so large that one can't support the other.
Right.
And either the debt has to collapse in value through a defaults in 1929 style depression, or you have to get to growing the GDP really aggressively through money printing and inflation.
Yeah.
And that is the debt, death, doom loop, which has happened many, many times, many societies. There's a good chart in there by Hirschman Capital that shows when you get to about 130% of debt to GDP, a monetary crisis always results.
Hyperinflation stage 1.
Yeah, and that's where we are right now.
Yeah.
That's where we are. So in my view, the odds of this, getting resolved, I mean, it's happening. It is definitely happening. And you see some other telltale signs. I mean, the fact that Bitcoin is close to a record high, the fact that gold is close to a record high, the fact that sovereign bonds are losing value in Bitcoin terms and in gold terms, these are all clues. And you said, what do we want to watch? So here's what I watch. I watch the price of Bitcoin. I watch the price of gold. I watch interest rates. And what I believe is going to happen is as these things continue to trend in unfavorable ways for the Federal Reserve is going to be forced into, and this is the title of the book, the big print. Because what'll happen, they'll have to do yield curve control. What'll happen is, well, let's back up. You're aware of this, most of your listeners are too, but it helps just as context. We're in a debt doom loop that goes in it. Let's take the U.S. federal government. Okay, the U.S. federal government with COVID came along, spending shot up a lot. We didn't cut it back. The U.S. federal government now spends $6.75 trillion per year. Okay, and we take in 1.8 trillion less than that last year, and that was the deficit. Right. We pay to the deficit gets funded by issuing debt. The debt sells into the debt market. We have an interest cost on that debt. Selling more debt into a fixed size market makes the interest cost go up. The interest cost going up, that's an expense for the government. That makes the deficit bigger. Can you see where I'm going here? Yes. Wash, rinse, and repeat. Yeah. More debt, more interest cost, higher interest cost, more debt. Yeah. It just gets worse and worse and worse.
And the debt's purchased with printed money.
And the debt is purchased with printed money. And so the point is that as that, rinse, wash, repeat gets worse, you get into, really kind of a sovereign debt crisis, quote unquote currency failure. Now, where will it show up? It shows up in the price of gold. It shows up in the price of Bitcoin. It'll also show up in the bond market, in the U.S. federal bond market. And it started to show up. It showed up a couple of times. It showed up in 2008. It showed up in 2020. It showed up in the fall of 2023 when the 10-year got over 5%, and 12 Fed governors came out and said, "Oh, that rate raising that's over. We stopped that for now." We were just kidding. And it's going to show up again, because what's going to happen is people are going to start saying, this debt. I mean, the sucker at the card table right now are the holders of long-term and medium-term U.S. government bonds, because there's no way they're going to get repaid in nominal fair value terms. They'll get paid the cash back. It just won't buy as much because we're built in inflation. So what's going to happen is those interest rates are going to go up to compensate for that risk. Again, making the debt doom loop worse. The government's going to say, we can't afford to do that. And they're going to be forced into doing yield curve control, which is, they did this after World War II, which they're going to say, we're not going to let the debt costs go above 4.5 or 5%. It's
price controls, basically.
Price controls. Yeah. How are they going to do that? They're going to buy the debt. What are they going to buy the debt with? Printed money, right? And so eventually, at the extreme, the entire U.S. bond market, which is $36 trillion, looks at the Fed and says, "Sold to you." Yeah. Great. You're right. This is a turkey. We don't want to hold it. You can buy it.
Yeah.
So now the Fed balance sheet, which is 7 down from 9 trillion, goes from 7 to add 36. Right. And that's just pure monetization, pure inflation, and that's the road to hyperinflation. I'm not saying we are definitely going to hyperinflation. I'm just saying it's a tail case. I think before all of that comes to fruition, we will have some kind of a monetary reset. I mean, I'm encouraged by what I hear, the things I hear out of Scott Bessent. I think it's good that we have a person like him as our Treasury Secretary now. I think he has an understanding of this issue. It may be too large for even him to handle, but at least he has an understanding of it. I think, like Yellen, in my view, was clueless. And so, if I'm correct, these things are in our future. And, people might naturally say, okay, well, great. When, how, et cetera. I don't know. I kind of think in the next 5 to 10 years. But I do know this with high conviction, in my opinion, that you want to own things the government can't print, right? That's a no-brainer.
That's always a good strategy.
You don't want to own cash. You don't want to own bonds. Real estate, it works, but it's got issues and taxes and so forth. The two best things the government can't print are gold and Bitcoin.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And they will both work. Bitcoin will work much, much better. And the book describes that and shows that. But, some people don't like the Bitcoin volatility. They're afraid of the technology. I get it. Gold's a good second choice.
No, that's a great point. And then, just to further that point, it's the physical gold and the physical Bitcoin, right? Because
well, that's
print the paper gold and print the paper
So
Bitcoin.
let's talk about that, right? Possession is 9/10 of the law. This is why Bitcoiners say, not your coins, not your keys, not your coins. In the 30s, Roosevelt grabbed all the gold, 6102. I mean, all of the Bitcoin that's sitting in an ETF, if the government decided someday, if Blue Team wins, and they say to themselves, gosh, it's funny, this Bitcoin and gold stuff is really killing the dollar. We just can't have this anymore. Let's make it illegal. Let's tax it. Let's make all those people turn that in. They could call up BlackRock. They could call up Fidelity. Say, send us all your Bitcoin. Give everybody cash for their Bitcoin. Don't steal it from them. Pay them out.
Probably CBDCs.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah. And off we go. Well. Your Bitcoin, my Bitcoin, the self-custody Bitcoin, they've got a much larger problem. Right. I mean, you want to get the 12 words out of my head? I mean, you got to kill me, right?
Come and take it, as they say in Texas.
Exactly. And if you kill me, I'm not going to give them to you if I'm dead. So, it's the self-custody is important, and the same with gold. I mean, it's funny as we speak today. I mean, we're actually seeing this. There's a run on the London gold vaults right now.
Yes,
I mean, we're seeing the LBMA suddenly, a couple days, couple weeks delivery has become 6 to 8 weeks, and they claim because it's heavy and there was a lorry blocking the door. Did you see that?
No, I didn't see that.
They had this article. I mean, it's hysterical. You can't make this stuff up. Some guy said, "Well, how come it's taking so long?" Well, we've had lorries blocking the street, and the stuff's pretty heavy. And it's so like, funny. You're kidding me, right?
It's like a billboard for Bitcoin.
Yeah, exactly. It is.
Should have tried the digital version of that gold.
Yeah, it works a lot better. You can settle in 10 minutes. Yeah, right.
Bitcoin custody is evolving. Both self-custody and single third-party custody come with significant risk and trade-offs. OnRamp is pioneering a new standard, multi-institution custody, which eliminates single points of failure, adding fault tolerance and redundancy to your setup. OnRamp secures your Bitcoin in a segregated cold storage multi-key vault, guarded by 3 independent institutional grade custodians, none of which have unilateral control over your keys. Your funds are fully auditable on chain, cannot be rehypothecated, and can only move or be withdrawn at your explicit direction. Multi-institution custody removes the technical, mental, and physical burdens of private key management, providing unparalleled peace of mind for you and your loved ones. Bitcoin is money, and as the price continues to appreciate, OnRamp helps you seamlessly tap into financial services like trading, inheritance, insurance, loans, IRAs, and more, all without compromising on security or accessibility. Schedule a consultation with the OnRamp team to learn more at onrampbitcoin.com/breedlove. Again, that's onrampbitcoin.com/breedlove. As one of my business mentors once told me, the job of the boss is to eliminate confusion. The best antidote for confusion is access to truth, which brings clarity to business decision-making and thus optimizes the drive toward future business goals. Over 41,000 businesses have future-proofed their business with NetSuite by Oracle, the #1 cloud ERP system, which brings accounting, financial management, inventory, HR into one fluid platform. With one unified business management suite, there's one source of truth, giving you the visibility and control you need to make decisions quickly and effectively. If I was still a CFO, NetSuite is undoubtedly the ERP system I would use in my business. Whether your company is earning millions or even hundreds of millions, NetSuite helps you respond to immediate challenges and seize your biggest opportunities. Speaking of opportunity, you can download the CFO's Guide to AI and Machine Learning at netsuite.com/whatismoney. This guide is packed with useful insights and is free for you at netsuite.com/whatismoney. Again, that's netsuite.com/whatismoney. Going back to that chart that you said, you had the red line, I guess, was the debt, basically. Yeah. And then the blue line was the GDP. The GDP,
yeah, it's in the book too, yeah.
GDP serves principal and interest on the debt. When those two lines diverge enough, you have a breakdown, right?
Right, that's where we are.
What is the role of technology in that, right? Because we get also radically increased productivity with technology and get GDP up. And so we are having some mega
and AI is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And look, and by the way, DOGE, by the way, is a generally good thing, and it will help.
This is the Department of Government Efficiency, not the shitcoin.
Right. Yes. The thing that Elon and Vivek originally is out of it now, but the notion of cutting back government expense, this is all good.
Yes.
And it does weaken the sound money thesis a little bit, but I would hasten to say that those who think it's a solution, total solution to the problem, I disagree.
They don't know how big the problem is.
Exactly. The problem's too big.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got 80% of the expenditures are pretty dialed in. And now if we can, if you want to means test Social Security and Medicare, you want to cut back defense spending, there are areas, you want to get the interest rates down, you want to go back to ZERP, because we're spending, the government right now, the interest run rate expense on the debt is $1.4 trillion a year right now. It's a
Which
big
is
number.
Like almost half of our direct tax revenues.
Yeah.
It's almost half the government direct tax revenues is spent on interest.
It's a big number.
Yeah. So if you're making $100,000 a year, you're spending $50,000 on credit card interest.
Right.
Basically. Yeah.
Well, and what the government's kind of become, the government has kind of become that family that keeps taking out new credit cards to make the minimum payments on the old ones.
Right. Yes.
And we all know that family, right? And at some point, there are going to be no more credit cards left. Nobody's going to give you the next one.
Yeah. You're running your own little Ponzi scheme in a way, right?
In a way. A debt scheme.
Yeah. What is it? Okay, so how does Bitcoin then play into that? If we're going through the sovereign debt crisis, is Bitcoin just the bomb shelter, basically? Like,
I think so.
Okay.
I mean, I think I think, obviously guys like Fink and Paul Tudor Jones and even Ray Dalio now, who used to be a gold guy, are coming around on it. It's digital gold. It's a better version of gold. It's superior in so many ways. But yeah, I mean, and I think the important point to make, and I'm sure, you've made it in all your other podcasts, is just that sovereign nations are starting to realize it too.
Sure.
Right. I mean, El Salvador got in early. Bhutan is in early. I was in the Middle East at a show last year, and I heard that, from well-connected sources that the Saudis, the UAE, and Oman are all stacking. I think it wouldn't surprise me if Russia was stacking. I don't think China really gets it. I'm not sure they are, but I think that Jason Lowry's thesis holds that if you're a country and you want to have reserves, sound money reserves, this is your best choice by far. If you do any kind of objective look at it, and if it's the case that countries start competing for Bitcoin, we're going to be orders of magnitude higher in terms of future prices.
So obviously, your gold bug historically become a Bitcoiner, and it's not either or.
No,
right?
it's not. I'm still both. Yeah, I just like Bitcoin more.
And it's funny for me too. Like, I don't know that I was a gold bug, but I definitely was bought into central banking being the main problem in the world. Right. But I thought gold had kind of failed in that front. But physical gold is still incredibly valuable. Like the way I told you this before we recorded, but just to reiterate, I look at it as like there's two broad visions of the future, right? There's one that's characterized, which I would call the ongoing digital age, right? We've got electricity, internet, and AI. Yeah. And there's another version of the world where maybe we go back to some dystopian thing. We don't have electricity, internet, AI, right? In that more dystopian world, physical gold is definitely the most dominant money, right?
For a brief period of time, yeah.
Yeah, and then in this other world of the ongoing digital age, I think Bitcoin will be dominant. So I just look at it probabilistically and say, give me this percentage gold, that percentage Bitcoin.
I think that's right. I really hope and pray that the no internet, the dystopian world doesn't come to pass. I don't think it will. But as I've always said, gold is really useful for bribing the border guards because I don't think they're going to have a lightning wallet, and understand how to what your Bitcoin is worth. And silver, silver coins. I got a bunch of silver coins, and I think they're very valuable for just everyday exchange in the sense that a gold coin is extremely valuable. It's hard to do commerce with a gold coin. It's $3,000 for an ounce. Right. On the other hand, a silver coin is $30, $40. That's a tank of gas. That's 3 chickens. That's how many pounds of beef, whatever it is. People know what it is. You know? So in terms of bearer money, silver coins are a great choice, and I think everybody should have some. Yes. In case there's that brief period of time where all the other forms of money aren't working. But I tend to be very optimistic, Robert. I think we're going to go into a much better world. I think we're going to make a transition to Bitcoin without incredible pain. I think there's going to be a one-time shock to people who've stored their wealth in fiat, and that's going to be unpleasant. You got a big bond portfolio. I think you're gonna be shocked. Yeah, sadly, but. That is what it is. I think the average if you look at the average person, like take a plumber, they have some savings, they have a mortgage on their house, they do well, they feed themselves. We go through an enormous monetary thing. Okay, well, their house is going to reprice in the new money. The debt that they had will probably be a lot less valuable. Their savings will probably be a lot less valuable. But if they're young and they know how to fix toilets and do plumbing shit, they're gonna be okay. They're gonna reprice in whatever the new currency is, and people are gonna need that useful skill. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So it's not now. If you're a big wealthy guy and you've got all your money in a bond portfolio, I think you could lose a large piece of your wealth. Right. Yeah.
No, I agree with that. So where do you think Bitcoin is going to succeed where gold has failed, or to say it more mildly, like where is Bitcoin sufficiently better than gold? And then further to that question, how do you go about orange pilling gold bugs? I would assume you focus on these areas.
Yeah, I've been to a couple conferences. Yeah. So Bitcoin's going to succeed because it's better technologically. It's easier to verify. It's got triple entry accounting. Just in every respect. And people say the gold standard failed, and it did, partially based on technology, but also based on politics. They figured out how to create paper gold. Nixon, basically broke the gold standard. He didn't have to, but he did. But Bitcoin is a much better version of gold. It doesn't deflect. It doesn't debase. It will become the superior asset to gold, and gold will have jewelry value. That's going to take a lot of time because there are 8 billion people that understand that gold has value, and there aren't that many people that understand Bitcoin has value. So there's, we're in this transition period between those two extremes. To answer your question, how do I orange pill gold pugs? So I generally encounter a couple of objections, and I go to the New Orleans Gold, what used to be called the New Orleans Gold Show. Now it's the New Orleans Investment Conference. And the guy who runs is a good guy, Brian London, and he's gotten much more open-minded about Bitcoin. He's had Lynn there, he's had me there, he's had Jane Lavish there, even though Peter Schiff goes every year and argues with us vociferously. But I generally, a lot of people get hung up on the physicality of it all. And with those people, I go to the money as a ledger argument. You know what I mean? Look, I mean, you can't touch the money in your bank account. It's just some numerals on your computer screen, right? I mean, like the cash isn't really there. I mean, money's a ledger. Always has been a ledger. Before gold even existed, people in caves made marks, which were indicating some kind of debit and credit system of who owed who what. So money doesn't have to be physical. What are the other objections the gold bugs bring up? Well, sometimes they bring up the government's going to kill it, but the ETF kind of swatted that one away. Sometimes they bring up, it's MySpace and Facebook will beat it. As we talked about offline, that's kind of not realistic because of the fact that it took so many years to build up this immutable network, and if anyone tried to do it again, it would be very susceptible to a 51% attack. So it's. I'm trying to think what other gold bug arguments
Peter Schiff, well, I debated him. One he brought up that I thought was interesting and kind of self-contradictory.
Yeah.
He was saying that, you Bitcoiners often talk about reducing counterparty risk, right? It's like, capitalism doesn't work without counterparties. So in fact, you don't need to worry about counterparty risk. And I was like, oh, okay, is that really, Peter? I go, do you hold physical gold?
Yeah.
Like in your house, physical gold in your house? He goes, yeah, of course I do. I was like, well, why do you do that? And he's like, in case the counterparty. And I was like, exactly. Like, I'm not saying counterparties, you don't need to divest yourself of all counterparty risk. Of course, we need to have contracts and all these things for capitalism to work. But you also need to have something that is immune to that, right?
Correct.
You hold something physically.
Yeah, the base layer has to be a bearer asset.
Yes.
By definition.
Exactly.
Yeah, and gold is a bearer asset and Bitcoin is a bearer asset.
Yeah. And then he goes straight to, where is the Bitcoin? And he goes straight to you can't touch it argument, so it's not a bearer asset. I'm like, you're just mistaking.
Yeah, it's a ledger. It's a bearer ledger asset, and it's there, and you've got you either believe in the ledger or you don't. Now, some people say, well, the technology, and the other argument I've heard more recently is the quantum computing argument.
Yeah.
And I've dug into that, and I've read as much as I can about it, and I think it certainly constitutes a risk, but I think it's a very far out risk, like decades out.
Yeah.
And I also think that we could actually apply it to Bitcoin, and maybe there'd be a hard fork, where everyone would migrate over to the new thing that solves that problem. So I just don't worry about that. I mean, decades. I mean, I don't have super number of decades left, so so I think I'm good. But it's. Look, there are risks to any choice financially, and everybody knows that. And so, I don't have all my money in Bitcoin. I don't have all my money in gold. I have some of my money in real estate, and I even have a small amount of cash just because I want to be able to take advantage of opportunities.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, it's all probabilistic.
Exactly.
You talk about Gresham's law.
Yeah. Most people know what that is, but we'll go over it again.
Define what it is quickly, and then how does it relate to Bitcoin?
Yeah, so Gresham's law, Sir Thomas Gresham was in the 1500s. He was an advisor to Queen Elizabeth I in England, and he penned a law that basically said that good money drives out bad, bad money drives out good. Mm-hmm. So what that means is if there are two forms of money being used, people will spend the one that's depreciating in value and hoard the one that's holding its value.
That's right. Yeah.
And so in today's world, what that means is you spend fiat, and we know fiat is debasing in value by 8% a year, which is the underlying long-term trend in the growth of M2. I mean, that's just a fact. It's happened. On the other hand, you take gold, which used to be the only form of sound money, and it's only being debased at 1.7% a year.
Right.
And so people would hoard gold, and they would spend fiat, save in gold and spend their money in fiat. And that's an example of Gresham's law. Yeah. Bitcoin, which is only debasing at 0.8% a year, and every 4 years that'll get cut in half, right, is now even sounder than gold. I mean, the stock to flow is much higher than gold. So, basically people are hoarding Bitcoin, knowing that it will hold its value, but to the degree that they need to make expenditures, they'll convert a piece of Bitcoin into fiat and use fiat to pay, because and maybe they'll pay with lightning rails and all that kind of stuff.
Or they'll try to pay it from fiat reserves first, or current income.
Exactly. I mean,
before they'd sell the good money.
You hang on to and save the money that that has the best chance of holding its value over time and space.
Right.
And Bitcoin, there's no better money for that than Bitcoin.
Right. And yeah, that's back to kind of the mathematics driving the monetization
Correct.
of Bitcoin. It's
Yeah,
like,
we all know what the rules are.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, and they can't fuck with it.
Yeah, and this is where it's serving the individual self-interest. Like, of course you accumulate the thing that's being debased the least because that maximizes the preservation of your purchasing power across time. And of course you spend the thing that's getting debased the fastest because that's depleting your purchasing power.
Exactly.
Why not sell it?
Why not?
Yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, I mean, look, if you don't have any savings, if you are just literally living hand to mouth, this debasement isn't really such a big issue for you.
Sure. But everyone, I mean, if you don't have any, like if you don't have, you're basically either increasing your savings or decreasing your savings every month, week, whatever period you want to look at it. And so therefore everyone should have at least some savings, even if it's just, you're just increasing $1 a month or whatever.
Of course.
You better not be going the other direction because if you do that, you're going bankrupt. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So this is applicable to everyone, basically.
It is applicable to everybody.
Yes.
Yeah.
Obviously, more applicable to people that have larger savings.
Correct.
Because they have more to lose, but still applies to everyone.
Correct. Yeah.
So you have this interesting kind of perspective that you're calling for a ban on financial derivatives, which have been called. Weapons
of mass destruction. Yeah, financial weapons of mass destruction.
Yes,
That's what Warren Buffett, one of the smart things he said. He's also said some stupid stuff about Bitcoin. He said Bitcoin is rat poison. There's a footnote in the book, and I said, and you're the rat.
Yeah, exactly.
So here's the thing. Here's how I see it. The central banks can make, as you say, they can make the exception. They've got the printer. They can print whatever they want. Let's talk poker, for example, is a good metaphor. If you're at a poker table and a bunch of us have, $1,000 and you come in and you have $1 million and we're paying, unlimited stakes poker, you can say whatever hand you want. You can bet $1 million and none of us can call you because we don't have it. Right. You win.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what the derivative game is writ large.
Right.
If you can bluff the market,
lean on your opponents.
Lean on your opponents. If you have more purchasing power through a derivative contract than the entire size of the market, you can distort the market.
Yeah.
And if you've got the printing press behind that derivative action to print and cover it, the market can't call you, so to speak. Right. And so this is what happened. This is how they manipulated the gold price down from 1,900 in 2011 to 1,000 in 2015. It was so beautifully done, so coordinated by the BIS and the central banks. It was unbelievable. It was like a military operation. I mean, Goldman Sachs came out and announced out loud, to all their clients, gold is overvalued. We highly recommend you short it. Okay, the BIS made some statements, the Fed made some statements, et cetera, et cetera. And this is a period where it just run from $250 an ounce in 2000 up to $1,900 an ounce in 2011. So you can imagine some central bank, and the money printing started in 2008. So there were some central bankers who were, they had tight sphincters. They're saying, holy shit, we're losing control of the gold price. This is not good. Okay. So what did they do? Goldman makes the announcements. They get all their clients short it. Okay. They get the central banks coordinated. And then within the space of like a month, they just literally bombed the shit out of it. It was down $150 one day. I was on vacation when it happened. Just talked about in the book. And the volumes that were going through, there's no way they were rational sellers. Right. No seller nobody had that kind of volume to sell except for the central banks. And so they literally just attacked the gold price and took it from 1,900 down to $1,000, to save their system. Yeah. And they could do that because they could use the derivatives. I mean, they weren't selling gold that they had. They were selling paper gold, which is part of what's blowing up right now. I mean, the gold game is very much like a big game of musical chairs. There are X number of physical ounces in the world today. Okay, they just exist. They're hard. I mean, you can touch them and feel them, right? Okay. We believe, and there's a lot of evidence that shows, based on looking at the data, that there are between 100 and 300 claims on every single
200x.
On every one. Let's say it's 100. Yeah. So for every one of those ounces, there are 100 paper claims. So there are 100 people who hold a piece of paper that says, I own gold. Right. But they don't.
Only one of them does.
Only one of them does. Yeah. And if they all ask for it at the same time, price of gold would go bananas. Right. Okay? Yeah. It's the paper gold market. It's the derivative-based paper gold market that has allowed that to occur.
This perfectly mirrors fractional reserve banking.
Exactly. Right? Yeah. And it's all laid out in the book. I mean, so this happened. It started with Clinton, And Summers and Barsky wrote an article or a paper, which you can find on the web, called Gibson's Paradox. So Clinton wanted to get reelected. It's in the book, on his second term. And they realized that in order to do that, they needed to have economic growth. They realized the easiest way to get economic growth was to have inflation, right? Because you get top line growth with inflation. They also realized that if they had inflation, remember Carville, who was his advisor at the time, said, Clinton said, "You mean to tell me that I'm not going to get reelected because a bunch of fucking bond traders, the bond vigilantes, are going to blow up the bond market?" And Carville said to him, "Yeah, when I come back in my next life, I want to come back as the bond market because you can intimidate anybody." Okay. Well, Summers, and who was Treasury Secretary, and Rubin, Rubin was Treasury Secretary, Summers was, I think, Chief Counsel of Economic Advice. They devised a mechanism. They said, "Don't worry about it, sir. We'll print the money and we'll attack the gold price at the same time. And if we can hold the gold price down, people won't think there's inflation.
Yeah.
So you're good. You're good to go." Right?
Crazy.
And that's what happened.
Okay, very important that people understand that. I think, especially gold bucks, right? Like this is how that's played out. There's been a lot.
And that's why gold hasn't worked, by the way.
Yeah, the Gold Antitrust
Action Committee, get it. Yeah, those guys are great.
They're great because they've
Bill Murphy, Chris Powell. They go to their site. It's all documented.
Yeah, they're documented, and this is not just in the U.S. They've done it in London,
everywhere,
and all over the place.
All over the place. Yeah,
coordinated suppression of the gold price.
Yes.
Really to uphold the integrity of fiat currency,
Correct.
right? Because if people had a better alternative, well, they would sell all their fiat and buy gold.
Correct.
So they need to squash the price of gold to prevent that run from happening.
Right.
How do you, let's say, critics of Bitcoin that would say, "Oh, they're just going to do the same thing to Bitcoin"? How would you?
That's a really great question, and I mean, George Gammon made a good point that there'll be paper Bitcoin in the future, and there could be. If you look at it today, there's not a lot of paper Bitcoin. You can see the number of derivatives, futures, options, et cetera, contracts out there. Compared to the total amount out there, the total amount on exchange, the total trading, they haven't done it. I mean, recall that they've had since the 70s to perfect this gold scheme, okay? And gold is a slightly different beast than Bitcoin. Gold has never had a year where it's gone up 5x, okay? Bitcoin has, okay? So suppressing gold and then waiting for it to come back down so you can cover your shorts without taking a loss or having to print a lot of paper to cover the loss has been an easier game than with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is, it's a wilder animal from a price point of view, so they can't necessarily get their arms around it quite as quickly. But to be fair, it is somewhat of a risk. I mean, I think that a couple of things argue against it. One is the whole notion of proof of reserves, which I think River is doing a very good job of, showing. I mean, basically, we get into trouble when people start claiming say they have Bitcoin and they don't have Bitcoin. Right. Yeah. So, one of the things that I think has happened is GLD, which is the biggest gold ETF. I don't think they have all the gold they say they have. Okay. So people have put money into GLD. That money has not gone to buy real physical ounces. It's just money that's there. They have a fraction of all the gold they say they have, but not all of it, in my opinion. And so if that kind of thing were to start to happen in Bitcoin, if BlackRock were to start to not buy, if the auditors were in on it with BlackRock and BlackRock were taking money in for the Bitcoin ETF, but not actually buying all the Bitcoin they claim to have, that would become problematic. And I don't think that's beyond the realm of possibility, but you'd have to get the auditors in on it. And I think there's, because of Bitcoin's your ability to do the on-chain analytics, that's another piece of this whole thing. I mean, you had double entry accounting. I mean, Bitcoin, you've kind of got triple entry accounting.
Right.
You've got independent people can see where all the transactions are. So I think it's more manipulation proof than gold in a large way. Easier to see, easier to verify, easier to move. Yeah. But I don't think it's completely manipulation proof. And I think it's something we always have to watch. And that's why in the book, there's a chapter in the book called Policy Response, where I basically talk about, okay, we're in a friggin' mess. How do we get out of it? Okay. And I say, we got to do this, this, and this. And then at the end of it, I say we got to ban derivatives. And that's why. Because we don't want Bitcoin to be corrupted in the same way that gold was corrupted. Got it.
Yeah. So there's definitely new advantages Bitcoin has in this regard, and that you can have cryptographic proof of reserves, right? And it's a very lightweight, low cost informational audit, right? You can basically prove that you have what you say you have.
Correct.
That if you try to do that with gold, it's a whole different thing,
Oh, yeah.
right? You got to get people involved and then documenting.
Well,
then
the perfect example, I'm sure you've thought about it, is, we say we have 261.5 million ounces of gold in Fort Knox and in New York at the West Point and in the Denver vault, in San Francisco vault too. And that hasn't been audited since 53.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's rumors that it's all gone.
Yeah, right. I mean, occasionally, Ron Paul told me he thinks it's all gone. Yeah. I mean, occasionally somebody will go in there and look at a few rooms, and say, "Oh yeah, there's some gold here." Yeah. But is it all there?
Right.
I don't know. I mean, right?
Yeah. So there's that. That's a very major advantage for Bitcoin,
right?
In terms of not being as vulnerable to these price suppression schemes.
Right.
There's also the portability dimension, right? Like you can settle with Bitcoin, like you said, in 10 minutes, in an hour, basically with finality. If there's ever even a sniff of malfeasance, you can withdraw, move, like go to a more trusted counterparty, go into self-custody, like
all of it.
The hyper portability of Bitcoin makes it more resistant to these schemes. Where gold is like, well, it's in this place.
As you're seeing right now, there are people who have gold in the LBMA vaults that are asking to get it out, and they're being told they can't have it, or
wait 6 weeks,
wait 6 to 8 weeks, and maybe we'll get it for you, whatever. I mean, this, I don't know. We've seen this before, and I don't want to get way ahead of myself. I don't want to get too far out over my skis. This could all calm down. Deliveries could return to normal. Everything could be fine. Or this could become, this is the smoke, and there turns out there's a real fire, and the paper gold market is in trouble. I mean, I think that's certainly within the realm of possibility.
Well, at 100 to 1 on the low side, the trouble's coming at some point.
It feels to me that way.
Just a matter of when.
But it hasn't happened yet. I mean, this is all of these events. I mean, they're what I call kind of quote unquote critical state events. Yeah. Avalanches are critical state events, right?
Right.
A bunch of snow sitting there.
Yeah. Right.
One snowflake falls.
The hair that broke the camel's back.
Exactly. Yeah. They're all critical state events. Yeah. And when they happen, and that's why I make this point in the book. I mean, it's kind of like, there isn't going to be a do-over here. You know what I mean? You're either going to, if we really do have a big monetary event, a big print, a big reset, it's a one, you're not going to say, oh, gosh, I'm sorry I fucked that up. Yeah. I want to go back and do it over again. It's going to be like, no
do-overs.
There's no do-over. Bitcoin is now it's now $1 million bid. Gold is 10,000 bid. Do you want some or not?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, pick one.
And you're going to remember where you were when that happened, right?
I think we will.
Yeah.
It'll be like 71.
One of my highest health priorities is keeping my brain in top shape. To take care of my brain power, I do many things, such as striving to read, write, exercise, and meditate daily. One of the latest tools in my brain power toolkit is MindLab Pro. MindLab Pro is a nootropic supplement that is scientifically proven to enhance your brain power. When I take MindLab Pro, my mind feels like it has a better grip on the world, my thinking is more lucid, and the articulation of my speech is radically improved. MindLab Pro has been tested in rigorous, double-blind, placebo-controlled human trials and has been proven to enhance brain power for users in every age group. MindLab Pro is an advanced formulation of 11 nootropic ingredients and is backed by research from over 1,400 human trials conducted over the past 32 years. So if you're looking to enhance your brain power, MindLab Pro is an excellent solution. Go to mindlabpro.com/breedlove to start enhancing your brain power today. Again, that's mindlabpro.com/breedlove. Knowing when to buy Bitcoin can feel complicated, and knowing how much to buy can be overwhelming. And getting started can be a headache, but it doesn't have to be. That's exactly why I recommend Coinbits, because it solves these major blockers and it's the easiest way to buy Bitcoin. With Coinbits' Roundups feature, you can automatically convert your spare change into Bitcoin while you shop. For example, when you buy a coffee for $3.50, the extra 50 cents is rounded up and it goes straight into Bitcoin. Here's why that's a huge win for you, because you don't have to be a tech wizard or try to time the market just right with Bitcoin. With Coinbits Roundups, you simply set it, shop, and stack sats. And you can set this up in under 2 minutes. Just visit the website, connect your card, and boom, you're buying a little Bitcoin every time you spend money. So stop wasting your time with complicated exchanges or confusing shitcoin apps. Coinbits simplifies your Bitcoin savings strategy. So go to coinbits.app/breedlove. Again, that's coinbits.app/breedlove /breedlove.
And we both agree with this general view, right? We're headed towards a SAT standard, a Bitcoin standard at some point. That entails what often Bitcoiners call hyperbitcoinization, right? There's going to be some point, the avalanche, this thing goes parabolic and it never comes back, right? Even we're denominating Bitcoin in dollar terms largely today, but if this event plays out, it's no longer going to be denominated in dollars.
The dollar will go away.
The dollar will go away, right?
My grandkids will use sats, I think, to buy things.
Exactly. So part and parcel to hyperbitcoinization is USD hyperinflation. I know this is a spooky thing.
I know. I don't like to go there because it's a bummer. But yeah.
But let's just stick with hyperbitcoinization in that case. Yeah. What do you think? What is that going to be like? How should we be preparing for this? Like what? Well, it's a good thing if you're holding Bitcoin, but there's also going to be probably a lot of instability that comes along.
Yeah, and there are going to be people who are hurt and all of that. And so what I'm hoping is that we just kind of trend in that direction
slowly.
Yeah, slowly and consistently. Yeah. And because I think that, society, a shock, a real discontinuous event to the upside will be, people will get hurt. Let's just face it. Yeah. I mean, people will get hurt. And yes, those of us who own Bitcoin will go, wow, look at this. I'm a lot richer than I used to be. But, all your neighbors will be hurting. The society there'll be a lot of problems with it. So I think the better way to do it is just to kind of advocate for this and move in that direction. I mean, and even if it happened today, I'm not sure it'd be a really great thing just because, although I'd really like to see the federal government fail. But we don't. I mean, we need better layer 2 solutions. Do you know what I mean? I mean, so Bitcoin. We haven't talked about this at all, but Bitcoin is winning the store value game. I mean, just crushing it, right?
Yeah. It's already won, basically.
Won it, winning, whatever you want to call it, and it's going to keep on winning. There's going to be so much winning here, they're not going to know what to do, right? But the medium of exchange game, man, I have to say, having been in the space, since I bought some in 2014, but more active in it since the 1920 timeframe, when I first started going to the big conferences and all. The Lightning Network, gosh, I wish it were coming along faster. Small things works great. $5,000, good luck. I mean, it's hard to do larger transactions. There's not enough liquidity yet. And this is why, although I shit on almost all of the crypto, I am open-minded to the fact that maybe Lightning isn't the layer 2 and maybe something else will be. Yeah. That we will all save in Bitcoin and then transfer to some other coin as a layer 2 kind of Lightning substitute. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a possibility.
Yeah, the verdict's still out. Definitely.
I think it is. Yeah. But I guess my point to you on, hyperbitcoinization, when does it occur? I tend to, so let's go back to the fourth turning model. This one started in 2008. You've studied them. You based your show based on, what is money. It was, the issue of this fourth turning is, is what is money. And they tend to last 20, 25 years, maybe 30 years at the longest. And so we started in 2008. I mean, I kind of think this is, and you look at where we are now in debt and debt to GDP and how broken it all is. I think this is going to get resolved in the next 5 to 10 years, Robert. I think between, we're at 24, 29 to 35. I think we'll have solved the what is money question. I think the world will know, and the new form of money will be, and maybe it's even a dollar backed by Bitcoin. I don't know. I mean, there are a lot of possible outcomes, but there will be a climatic event that will make enough people realize that what we have isn't working, and that we need a sound money standard. I think that's what will happen. And I think, if inflation gets higher and persists, and we keep printing money, eventually, I mean, the outcry already is high, and it's only going to get worse, right? I mean, that's how I see it.
Yeah. So do you think there is going to be some type of acute economic crisis at some point? But won't. I mean, I think Trump recently banned CBDCs.
Yes.
Or something to that effect. So maybe that is out of the question now, but it seems like the centralized state would want to use,
absolutely.
Never let a good crisis go to waste. So they would use that as an opportunity.
And that's why I hope Trump and Bissent are bold and courageous and try to do what I've outlined in the book in terms of a monetary reset in their 4-year window. Here's an alternative case. They don't do it. They can't be bold and courageous enough. The world's not ready for it. They don't take the chance. The 4 years go by, inflation's high, and suddenly blue team wins. Because, I mean, what the voters have been doing really is just whoever's in there. They've been voting the other. Okay.
Yeah.
You guys didn't solve it.
Right.
Let's try this other team.
Right, because again, politics don't solve problems. So people just keep the problems persist. It doesn't matter who you put in office.
And so at the margin, blue team wins next time around. Well, now Stephanie Kelton is the Treasury Secretary. And the
Fed's balance sheet goes to $100
yeah,
trillion
exactly. Well, and universal basic income, is now built in, right? Because we've got to help the people, and who cares about the deficits? We don't care, and right. I mean, and so and by the way, and that's where. Hey, gosh, these Bitcoiners and gold people are really kind of ruining our currency, which is, part of our national policy, part of our national defense. We need to tax gold and Bitcoin at 90%, and we need to grab all the gold and Bitcoin the way Roosevelt did. I mean, that's possible. Yeah. That's entirely possible in a blue, in a heavily blue administration facing an economic crisis, right? Which is why possessing the gold, possessing the Bitcoin, and even possessing your own self and sovereignty and, and not being too long real estate. I mean, look, my kids are here. I'm going to want to be here to see my grandkids. But, if they came after me and said, we're going to do an unrealized capital gains tax on 90% of your Bitcoin profits, I'm no longer an American citizen.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, I'm out of here.
Multiple passports come into play.
Yeah,
all that.
I mean, I'm out of here. So, I mean, and could that happen? I pray it won't.
Yeah.
But the left, I mean, sure, I could see them doing it, trying to do it.
For sure. They've already been talking about it.
Yeah.
So, fortunately, again, I don't think politics solves problems. You just get less bad political administration.
Correct.
And so fortunately, we got Trump and the less bad political administration.
Absolutely. And in many ways, pretty good, with a few exceptions.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, like you brought up the Department of Government Efficiency, which has been identifying a lot of wasteful spending and cutting it back, which is good.
Awful, yeah.
Whole rabbit hole to go down into there. There's been a recent push by Elon Musk saying he's going to have Ron Paul audit the Federal Reserve.
God, wouldn't I love that? So here's the thing: the Fed is independent and independent of Congress. They report to Congress.
Yeah.
Now Congress could all vote to audit the Fed, but don't count on that happening anytime soon. I know that Musk would like to have Paul go and audit it, but you know what the odds of that happening are? I mean, they're literally zero. I mean, the Fed is going to say "F you," unless.
And how does the Fed prevent Congress from voting to audit them?
Well, basically they've lobbied and paid all these Fed. I mean, the Fed is a heavy supporter of a lot of congressmen.
So what a fucked up scheme.
Yeah.
The institution that can print money can bribe the politicians that regulate them.
Pretty much.
That's like you're a football player in a game bribing the referee
to
let you score the touchdown.
That's pretty much right.
Yeah.
And just to give you an example, and it's in the book as well, and it's an amazing story. So Judy Shelton, I don't know if you recognize that name. She's a sound money advocate. She's a gold person. She's been around for a long time. She's a scholar. She's got a PhD. She's really an outstanding person in terms of the gold world. And she got close with Trump when he was in Trump administration 1. He recommended that she be a Fed governor. He nominated her, and they got a paper with like 130 economists, congressmen, and senators wrote saying she advocated a return to the gold standard. She would be dangerous to put on the board of the Federal Reserve. Yeah, dangerous. And then when she was in there being interviewed by these people, I mean, you got to go watch the tapes. It's despicable the way, and she says what I say. Sound money is a moral issue, and everybody has the right to their savings not being debased. That's all she says, right? And to do that, we should return to a gold standard. She's got a specific idea of a gold-backed bond, gold-backed treasury bond, which is a good idea. And she was just pilloried by these people. So you have to remember that the scheme that's defrauded the common man, who I wrote this book for, is a partnership of the government and the quintillionaires.
Yeah.
Wall Street.
Right.
So the quintillionaires love it because they're getting rich. The government loves it because it leaves them in power and gives them tons of control, and they get to do things like USAID and throw money all over the place, and basically control our lives, control the message, fund Politico, a left-wing organization. I mean, all of that. And the Fed Fed does the same thing, more or less. I mean, you'll see it, again, in the book, Danielle DiMartino Booth has talked about in the book. She wrote a great book called Fed Up, which I borrowed from. And by the way, the book really, I wrote it, okay? I assembled it. I think I'm good at that. And I think it's a really good book. I borrowed from everybody in this community. I didn't really write this book. What this is this is the Reader's Digest version of The Case for Sound Money and Making America a Better Place, drawing on Safe and Jeff and Lynn and, you name it, right? Daniela and all those people. I mean, I just pulled all of it together and put it in a format that your average citizen could read and get mad and go, God damn it. I understand why they're screwing me. And, I'm fed up and I'm not going to take it anymore. I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. So,
I appreciate the humility, but that's the way it is, right? We're all nodes on the network. We're all recycling one another's ideas.
Well, that's the thing. And the beautiful thing is we're all working for each other, right?
Exactly.
You're working for me doing this.
Right.
I'm working for you.
Yes.
Sailor's working for us. Booth is working for us.
Exactly.
Lynn is working. I mean, we're all, right? We all have a common objective, which is to see the world get better.
To promote the level playing field.
Yeah, by having a level playing field.
Yeah, and it is the beautiful thing about Bitcoin. Another way to describe it is as it is the world's first and only decentralized organization.
Yeah.
Or we're all, I guess you could say gold, to the extent that it was sound money at some point, sort of functioned similarly, but Bitcoin's different, right? It's like a less corruptible version of gold, basically.
Yeah, it's better.
And so we get, guys, we're all, I put it like this once. In a world where no man can be trusted to talk anything than his own book, Bitcoin lets us all talk one another's book. Right? We're all rooting for one another to succeed because it all increases our purchasing power individually.
Exactly.
So it's this brilliant, beautiful alignment of the individual and the collective incentives.
Correct. And it forces everybody else to say, am I going to join them or am I going to be left behind? It's like pick one. I got my lifeboat, Titanic's sinking. Yeah. What do you want to do?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Game theory.
You were saying recently that the strategic Bitcoin reserve is close to a shoe-in.
Yeah. So
do you still think that's the case?
I do. I mean, it's been diluted, right? So, we heard that. We saw Besant and Lutnick standing next to Trump, and he said he's creating a sovereign wealth fund, which I think is that's another word for a strategic Bitcoin reserve. I wish he'd used the word Bitcoin more. I wish he'd said sovereign wealth. I mean, the language was a little mixed up. Probably the most disappointing thing I've seen Trump do, and I like a lot of what he's done, was this, Trump coin and Melania coin. I was like, what are you doing, dude?
Shitcoiner in chief.
Yeah, that really, I was very disappointed in that. But set that aside. Everybody comes with good and bad. Yeah. But with respect to this reserve, so the disappointing thing here, and Bitcoiners, we've all had to come to grips with this, is that the crypto crowd has given a lot of money to politicians, has given a lot of money to Trump, and we're talking XRP, we're talking Solana, we're talking all the things that aren't Bitcoin, some of which are just, downright evil and bad, some of which are, borderline interesting technology projects that if they're done, as Saylor says, if they're done ethically, I don't argue with, right? They've all given a lot of money to the political system, and they've helped us get to where we are. Let's face it, part of getting, Ross out of jail and getting, all the things we've gotten is the fact that, there was a big block of quote unquote votes in Bitcoin/crypto. And so we've had to drag crypto along with us, which most of us don't like a lot of, but okay, and that's the price we pay. And the strategic reserve will, we know that, Brad is trying to get, XRP in there, and maybe he'll succeed. I hope he doesn't, but, so be it. It'll have Bitcoin in there for sure. The Ethereum guys will try and be in there. The Solana, all these other guys are trying to get a piece of it. I get it. I think that's unfortunate. But those coins are going to die on their own. They all suck. They got no use case. Yeah. Nobody really wants them. So, Bitcoin's going to win. So it doesn't really matter. So my view is, hey, look, we went from 2 years ago not having an ETF and not having any politician have this shit on their radar screen to this year having Robert Kennedy and Trump speaking at the Bitcoin conference in Nashville. I was there, and both of them giving fabulous speeches in support of Bitcoin. Kennedy obviously understands it more than Trump did, but Trump will come along. and Vivek probably got in his ear and taught him about it. I mean, we're going in the right direction here. So I'm very happy with the progress. I mean, is it exactly what I wanted? No, of course not. I wish he'd said, Bitcoin only, we're going to only hold on to the 200,000. We're going to support the Loomis bill and start buying 200,000 coins a year for 5 years. Boom, done.
Yeah.
That would have been great.
Yeah.
That hasn't happened yet. But that, it's politics, right?
Yeah, of course. And it is corrupted by all these shitcoin games.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, I agree that they are. I think the shitcoins do die out, but this actually could put them on life support for a long time. They become zombie coins, right?
Sadly.
The state's buying them.
Sadly. Yeah. Sadly. I mean, I don't get it. I mean, DOGE is an example. What the hell? I mean,
the dog coin.
The dog coin. I mean, I just don't get it.
Yeah, it's this big, gnarly social experiment on turning memes into money, right? Well, it's kind of a very fascinating thing Bitcoin did. Naval said this in like 2011 or 2012, that speech and money were now the same thing. So that Bitcoin and information, you even in your book, you say money is information.
Yeah.
Bitcoin's like the purest expression of that, right? It actually is just digital information.
Yeah, right.
And so when you take that genie out of the bottle, well, all of a sudden it's like, well, let me dog coin, cat coin, color. Like you can just make any idea, any piece of information can all of a sudden become money.
Yeah.
Not money. It can be monetized in like a, micro shit kind of way.
Yeah.
It doesn't last. It's not sustainable. And it just, to me, is this manifestation of this universal human tendency to print money. It's like, you see the shitcoin phenomenon. I was like, well, that's why we have central banks. It's like, because everyone likes money, everyone wants to print money. Yeah. And in that world, the money that nobody can print will win.
It's also a manifestation of human beings, just their tendency to gamble.
Yeah. Exactly.
I mean, I view this is kind of like, it's just a different form of sports betting in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, my CrossFit gym that I go to, the guy who runs is a great guy, and he's a Bitcoiner. And he totally gets all his store of value money is in Bitcoin. He's actually played the crypto game, and because he's smart and he knows how to get in and get out, and he gets heads up on new deals and coins. He's managed to extract some money from it. I don't. It's not something I think is honorable or ethical or worth doing, but people do it. Yeah,
it's participation in pump and dump schemes, which is unfortunate. But a lot of people don't know what they're doing. Right? They don't understand the other side of that trade. They think it's just coins on a screen. Buy low, sell high, and no one's
getting hurt. Right.
But what they don't see is the other side of that trade.
That's
they're exploiting someone's ignorance and
exactly.
Yeah. I don't know. It takes some time in the arena to learn these things. But
I don't think it's time well spent. Just as I don't think gambling is time well spent.
Agreed. Agreed. What do you like? I mean, we're in a Bitcoin bull market. Right? Yep. Bitcoin's above its prior all-time high price. Yep. Historically, these things play out like, there's a halving, and then we have about 18 months of bull cycle before we get a new all-time high price, and then we have a big drawdown, trade sideways for 3 years, and then repeats.
Yep.
So we would expect to see a new all-time high Bitcoin price by the end of 2025, roughly.
I think that's right.
What are you expecting or excited to see play out throughout the rest of this year?
Yeah. 2025? So I think we're forming a flag. If you look at it, I like the way it's behaving. It builds a base and it moves. We're at 58, move to 100. That's a 40-point move. There's a thing in technical analysis called flags where, and flags fly at half mast. So 58 to 100 is 42K. 100, next move, I think we're going to go to 142. Okay, we'll probably flag again there. The next one goes to 180. My sense is, I don't know how high this cycle goes. I hope a guy like Samson is right and we go to $1 million a coin, because I might sell a few at that level. I'm quite certain we will get to 180 to 240 or 50 this time. I think there might be an argument that we go even higher. I think the last cycle was somewhat truncated by the China ban. The SBF thing obviously took us down to an extremely low level. It's really hard to say. I mean, I tend to rely on the power law as kind of a base case. I mean, it's got 97% correlation looking backwards. Yeah. And it would suggest that the top this time is in the twos, in the low twos. But things are different. I mean, we've got nation state adoption. We've got an ETF. If you look at the historical drawdowns, the biggest was 90. They've been getting less deep. I think the last one was in the 70s, low 70s. I would expect this one might be in the 50s if we do have. But so if I had to model, if I just had to guess, maybe we go to 250 and then we draw back down to 150. I don't know. I mean, I do think with respect to the power law, I do believe at some point it'll break. All models do break. I think this asset's unique. And these models, as Saylor says, these models are meant to be destroyed. So the model will break into the upside, in my opinion. But that's kind of hyper-Bitcoinization. I don't know, when everyone comes to realize, oh my God, I got to get this. And I don't care about the price.
Right.
I don't know when that'll happen. I don't know if that'll happen this cycle or if it'll happen next cycle. But that's coming. So that's, I just don't know.
Gotcha. And then what are you like? Do you think the narrative shift will change these cycles? Like if we do get not just a narrative shift, I guess I would say the cohorts of buyers, right? If we do get to this point where the U.S. is stacking a national Bitcoin strategic reserve, and then country A, B, C, D all imitate, do you think this whole pattern just breaks? Is that what breaks the pattern?
I think that could be it. I think it could be just more, RIAs doing it. I think it could be more institutions doing it. I think that just, it's just going to spread. I mean, if you look at there's a good chart in the book that shows adoption curves and how they happen, and we're really at the early part of it inflecting to the upside. I mean, when we adopted cell phones or when we adopted PCs or when we adopted anything that's a new technology. Saylor said this. He says he thinks the next 10 years are really the golden age. I think he's right. I mean, and so therefore, I think the drawdowns, they're not going to look the way they have in the past. I think we were building a base prior to a pretty hard run. And we'll get drawdowns. I mean, people will use leverage. They will get way out over their skis. It will get ahead of itself.
Sure.
And by the way, some of the old-time hodlers will say, gosh, 250? I've been holding these things since 10,000. I got a whole mess of them. Yeah. Yeah, I'll let a couple go.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's how it works.
I mean, that's how it works.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about the book again.
Sure.
I always like to selfishly ask people, what was your writing process? I think you said you just went full out for 6 months.
Yeah.
Any advice for people that are trying, as a guy that's trying to write a book?
Don't do it. It'll consume your life and your wife will be mad at you.
Yeah, well, I'm already in that phase. So for people that are definitively going to publish a book, do you have any tips, tricks?
ChatGPT is great for getting information quickly. Sure. It changed my world. No, I mean, what I would try and do, I'm best in the morning, get up, work out, and I would try and get most of my writing done by noon.
Yeah.
And then maybe go back and edit it in the afternoon and then get to bed early. I started writing it in May, June, and I just, one of the things you'll see is that when you're doing it, it spilled out of me. I actually feel like it was kind of, heavenly, it was like divinely channeled into me. It just poured out of me. I knew exactly, and what would happen is I would, either in the shower or sometimes when I did, I'm one of those guys, I tend to wait at 3 or 4 in the morning just for a little while. I don't know why, I don't sleep well. And that was when I'd have some insight and I was like, oh shit. And I'd have to go get a pen and write it down because when I fall back asleep, if some mornings I didn't, I fell back asleep. I was like, what the hell was I thinking last night? So I would write it down. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And just with each of those and with each iteration, the other thing I would suggest is a very important point is get a killer editor. So, and I want to just give a huge, huge shout out. My editor is a woman named Mel Schilling. She's edited some other Bitcoin books. She's a Bitcoiner. She's friggin' brilliant. Awesome. And this book is, in my opinion, it's a good book. I mean, I'm not bragging. I just think it is a good book. And but mainly because of her. I mean, in other words, she really, I can write okay, but she can write well. And the difference is night and day. I mean, unless you're a professional writer, whatever you write, having a professional editor can improve the quality of anybody's work. And it's still my words and my ideas, but she helped me say them in a crisper, cleaner way.
Got it.
That make it easier for a reader to digest. And so I think it's a strong piece of advice to get a really good editor.
And what was the workflow between the two of you?
So you get a Google Doc, and I would write, and I'd write a chapter, and then she would go through and she could make little suggestions, right? And so her suggestions would come back in a different color, and then I can accept or reject, or I DM her and say, or I propose, and then, so you have your original color, her color, and then I could pick a third color. Well, I didn't like my original, and I see your suggestion, but this is a hybrid. Let's do this.
Okay.
And just back and forth in real time.
Amazing.
Right. Yeah. And that is a technology that, again, think about how you would have done that in the olden days.
Sure.
So I'd be working at something in the middle of the night, and she'd get up in the morning, and she'd come back and she'd say, "Oh, I think that was brilliant. Great. You did a good job on that. No, you got to fix this and change that." And, okay. And so it's just a constant back forth to make it better. Yeah.
That's great. And then was she involved throughout the 6 months or like towards the end?
No. Well, no, that's not true. Pretty much, yes. I had written a pretty good start.
Yeah.
Before she got involved. Okay. But it wasn't anything close to what we got now.
Yeah.
I mean, let's say I'd written, 6, 7, 8 chapters, and I had the outline kind of done, and then she dove in, and once she went to work on a couple of the things, I was like, oh my God, you're hired. You're hired. She's brilliant. She is. And I've given her a stream of the revenue off the book. I mean, she's. I'm thinking of calling her a co-author. I mean, she's really, really awesome. Good. Yeah. I mean, she's outstanding.
And then how many revisions? So like, say you get to finished product. Yeah. Are you then revising it several times?
You're always revising it. I mean, so I think there are probably two. There's one rough read through. You'll write something, she'll fix it. Yeah. You'll agree with her fixes, you'll leave it alone. Yeah. And so you write the whole thing that way. I'd add a chapter. Yeah. She fixed it. Okay. So now she's been through it one time. Yeah. Okay. Now we're coming back. Let's go through it again. Got it. And okay, well, you got to, I don't understand this. You got to expound on this more. And by the way, throughout this, my wife was heavily involved. Honey, read this. Do you understand it? Because she's not a financial person at all. She's ads. And
so she's your like test audience person.
Exactly.
Got it.
She's, hang on a second. You introduce the Federal Reserve. Nobody knows what the Federal Reserve is. Put it in a footnote. Okay, great, done. I mean, there's a whole chapter in there that was her idea. She said, Larry, everybody's skeptical of this shit. Why don't you, and I remember everyone was skeptical of the fax machine and everyone, why don't you do a chapter on skepticism? It's like, great idea, honey. So I've got a whole chapter. I mean, I've got Lynn's cartoon in there where, remember the menace that electricity was?
Oh, yeah.
You remember that one where, I mean, I put that tweet in there, right? I mean, it's just kind of like, and so I just, hey, I get it. It's a new technology and you're skeptical. Here's how people were skeptical in the past. And there are quotes in there from, Marshall Fox said, "Oh, the airplane will never have any practical use." Yeah. Do you know what I mean? All those kinds of things,
Fax machine quote.
The fax machine quote from Krugman, right? Yeah. So, I mean, so that kind of stuff. So then you go through it a second time. So now you've got it pretty well written. Then you'll start inserting little things. You realize, oh, I had a good idea here. You'll insert it. And then you go through with a real fine-tooth comb for grammar and last checks. So, but then you're not done. Then you got to go to a layout artist.
No, you're right.
To get it laid out. And I got a great layout artist, a guy named Nico Laminen, who's over in Finland, and he did a fabulous job. Really, really good guy. Couldn't recommend him more highly. And that, and so just so you have a sense, we were done writing the book in September. We hammered it from September to December to get it to be really tight. On December 29, we said it's done. It's really tight. We sent it to Nico, and so it took all of January to get it laid out. Okay. And we found a few more little changes and tweaks, but they were small. Yeah. So, and then we launched it February 4th or 5th or something.
Amazing. So awesome. And then most recently you said it went to #1 in investing.
It went to one of new books in investing. I don't know if that's a really big deal. One of the things I'm proud of, but actually it's a pain in the ass. I guess Amazon has an algorithm. They figure out how many books to order based on what the sales rate and stuff is. Well, my first sales rate must have been slow. They ran out. So if you actually go online right now and try and buy it, you can buy the hardcover, you can buy the Kindle, but the paperback, they're out of them. Now, they told me, I called them up, I complained. Yeah. I mean, it's a nice problem, right? But sure. I called them up, I complained. They said, well, we'll be back in stock in a few days, but we got to catch up. And there's another place you can buy them at the Bitcoin Infinity store in Europe. They'll take sats. And so if you're a European buyer, that'd be a good place to buy it too.
Awesome. So, yeah, well, that's what you get when you write a good book.
Hopefully, yeah. Hopefully it works. I mean, Robert, I'm going to measure this by my goal is to orange pill the world.
Yes.
If this helps, I call it success.
Amen to that. That's another, again, the alignment of Bitcoiners, right? I think that's all of our goal.
Right? It's all of our goal.
There's sort of like this selfish perspective on that.
Of course
like,
there
of course, it's to pump your bags. But there's also this major selfless component, right?
Yeah.
Where you're like, no, this is actually really important for the human race.
Absolutely. The biggest, people ask me a lot of times, what do you think the best thing about Bitcoin is? I say end the wars.
Yeah.
To me.
For sure.
And get the corruption out of government.
Yeah.
I'm so tired of this shit.
But you're one and the same, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I'm just so tired of this shit. DOGE, all the stuff they're finding. Come on.
It's unreal. Like,
it's just horrible.
We've become so, we've normalized all of this corruption. Like,
Right.
it's just inevitable and that's what humans do. But,
No,
it doesn't have to be that way.
It doesn't have to be that way. It's not that.
Yeah.
It's not.
It really is an emergent property of the incentive structure.
Correct. And when you've got a monetary system that can't be cheated, it's by definition fair because it's a mathematical protocol.
Yes.
Everything else will get better. I swear it will. I know it will.
Yeah. I've heard someone quote Jeff Booth describing Bitcoin as like forced cooperation. Again, it's this weird paradoxical thing.
Yeah.
It's like it doesn't actually force, it's just incentivizing cooperation. But
Correct.
it kind of like,
it's a good point.
The way I always like to say it, which is a little bit abstract, I guess, is like it makes coercion less profitable.
Correct.
So people stop
that's right.
doing it as much, right? They start cooperating and stop coercing.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful thing. That's what we want. That's what humans are really designed to do.
It's a totally beautiful thing.
Yeah.
I say it in the book. One of the things is I think the reason the world is as bad is the wrong people are winning.
Yeah.
The people who have figured out how to game the system, they're winning, and they're not good people.
That's right. Yeah.
I guarantee you that a government run by Bitcoiners would be a much fairer world than the one we're in now.
Yeah.
Based on the Bitcoiners I know.
For sure. And it may not even, it's probably not going to look anything like the government we
Well,
have today.
that's right. I talk about that too. I think there's a good chance that, we move to more decentralized governments,
sure.
more like Switzerland. What do we really need a big federal government for?
Nothing. Like,
yeah.
Again, the founding fathers' vision, it was like, to protect the homeland, right?
Right.
And to
extract
tariffs.
There aren't that many threats. My gut is if we went around the world and said, hey, we're going to dismantle our nuclear, our arsenal. You all can do it, should do it as well. I bet we'd get agreement around the world. And then we're going to create a multinational task force that's going to be able to inspect any PIME, any place, anywhere. Mm-hmm. And anyone found working on it is going to spend the rest of their life in prison.
Yeah.
So we get rid of that issue, the nuclear threat. And then, we're going to dismantle our military because we just don't think that's necessary.
Yeah.
And, it's like, the government, in my view, what the founding fathers envisioned was just that the government would be a fair referee.
Yeah.
And I would be so happy to pay 10% of my gross income every year to a federal government to provide me with police and courts.
Preserve life, liberty, property.
Yeah, and just I want criminals in jail.
Yeah.
I want, I want the laws to be followed. That's it. That's all. If the government did that, huge win.
Yeah,
in my
this
view.
is the trap, right? This is the trap we've been in since time immemorial. It's like, who's going to watch the watchdogs?
Right.
We've always wanted that ideal, but the corruption, you put someone in that position, and they're like, oh, I've got all this power. Why not
do this?
Stuff my pockets with it.
Yeah. Why not do that? Yeah, no, that's right.
Yeah, decentralization does seem to be the key. And again, that's just not something you achieve technologically. Like even with Bitcoin, it's like Satoshi didn't make it decentralized. Like it had to go through this growth process to become battle hardened and decentralized in an organic way.
Right.
It's not something you created in a lab. Like again, you can create the conditions for it to flourish in that way, but you can't guarantee it, or it's an interesting thing.
Yeah. Look, the book says this, and I really do believe it. Technology is going to save us.
Yeah.
The microprocessor, the invention of the microprocessor by Shockley and Intel in the early, 50s, 60s. It's going to save us.
Yeah.
Thank God. We were headed towards doomsday, and the internet's breaking down these big, structures, and we're all getting more information. There's a very, very bright future ahead, really. Yeah. It's going to be fantastic. We just need to kill these central banks. They need to be just put under.
Yeah. I like what G. Edward Griffin wrote at the end of The Creature from Jekyll Island, that we were going to slay it with 1,000 lances of truth.
Yeah, it's a good line.
And you know, he's still not a Bitcoiner, probably because he's in his 90s. But I think Bitcoiners are those lances of truth.
Oh, absolutely.
Basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you've got kids.
I got kids.
But they're not kids, right?
Right, they're in their 20s.
Yeah, they're in their 20s. Okay. How do you interact with them on this topic? Like, obviously, there's a lot of tumultuous stuff coming up that we're going to need to navigate. How do you try and advise them or prepare them for the future you see?
Well, so first of all, I've orange pilled them all and successfully.
Yeah.
They all kind of get it. They think Dad's a little crazy. And mom thought Dad was really crazy in the early days, and I'm a little less crazy now.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Because it's kind of working. Mom's like, hey, maybe you weren't so nuts.
Yeah.
I just say to them, hang on, better times are coming.
Yeah.
One or two of them are maybe thinking of shifting over into doing more work in the Bitcoin space.
Yeah.
But they're all kind of in a pickle. They're all doing really well. They all have really good jobs. I'm proud of them. They're very successful. But like kids in their 20s, they look around and think, how the hell am I going to buy a house?
Sure.
I don't have any money.
Yeah.
Houses are crazed, and I'm just kind of like, calm down, do well, do what you're doing, do what you love, do what you enjoy, add value, save in Bitcoin, and they all do.
Yeah.
And, better things are coming for you.
Yeah.
But I get it. I mean, I get, a lot of people on Twitter, hammer the boomer generation, a lot of greedy boomers. And I get how these younger generations feel like they've been dealt a shitty set of cards. They have.
Yeah.
I don't dispute that. But in turn, we can fix that.
Yeah.
And they can fix that. They can help fix it. They can orange pill their friends.
Yes.
I mean, Booth said to me, we had a nice dinner out in the Middle East when we were at the Mina show. And he said to me, if we could just get everybody to adopt this shit, that system would fail so fast that your head would spin.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the adoption phase, I mean, and therefore, okay, I'm thinking around, well, what can I do to help with adoption? All right, I know this shit pretty well. I've been doing this for a while. I can write. I'll write a book.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm done. I'm not writing a second book. And I'm probably, and I think I may do a Trace Meyer. I may, after a few years here, I'm going to kind of fade away a bit. I'm not young. My wife wants to travel a lot. I got a lot of books I want to read. I got a lot of fitness I want to pursue.
Yeah.
So I may become less available as a Bitcoiner in 5 years. I may not be doing this, but that's okay. Well, you guys will carry on without me very, very well, I'm sure.
Well, your contributions are much appreciated.
Well,
that
thanks.
is for sure. There's a lot of young Bitcoiners, but I think we need that healthy dose of wisdom from people in your generation.
I mean, that's what I bring. I bring the experience.
It's a stabilizing force because young Bitcoiners get a little bit too out over their skis on things sometimes, whether it's their ideas or whatever. So
yeah, but it's all good. It's all good. The enthusiasm is what counts.
But it needs balance, basically.
Correct.
So I like older generation Bitcoiners because it brings balance to the force.
Yeah.
Before you ride off into the sunset, I am a father. I have a 6-year-old daughter.
Right.
What advice would you give a father of a young child?
Yeah, it goes to, this is trite. Everyone says it goes so goddamn fast around her. You're before you know it, she's gonna be gone. Mm-hmm. So never miss a family vacation. If I look back at my age now and my kids and we all get together and talk, we remember every vacation, all the funny shit that happened. It was like so goddamn special. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And we did everyone we could afford, and the time we could get. The kids have school breaks, and then of course we did summers. Just spend time, as much time as you possibly can, because someday they'll be gone, and that those memories are irreplaceable. I mean, I read a great book. I can't recall the name of it now, but it talked about what wealth gets you, and what wealth really gets you is experiences. And at my age now, it's not that car I owned a while ago. It's that time I spent the money I didn't even have to go on that ski trip with my buddies and all the funny shit that happened. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That memory's never going away, ever. So I would suggest to all young people, don't cheat yourself on the things that make a life. You know what I mean? I mean, when I was in my 20s and 30s, I worked like a dog. And I had chances to do some fun stuff, and I thought, nah, I can't afford it, or I don't have the time. Mm-hmm. And as I look back now, I have regret. I could have afforded it somehow, and I could have made the time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And with my kids too, same thing. So I would just say, work like a dog, do everything you can to better yourself, improve your life, get ahead, all that other stuff. But don't forget why you're really here, because someday it's all over, and those memories are what you cherish. I mean, at my age now, I really cherish those memories in a big, big way. I mean, I didn't like going to Disneyland. I didn't like the prices. I thought it was a fucking ripoff, et cetera, et cetera. But I took, my wife and we took our kids to Disneyland twice, and they still talk about how much they loved it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just did it because I had to do it.
Yeah. We just did it this past December. Took my daughter to Disneyland, and
you know the drill.
She had an amazing time. The look in her eyes was all worth it. For us, it was like,
why am I doing this, right? And every time you turn around, they hit you for another, hey, take a picture and spend $50, right? Yeah.
It was an interesting experience to see that whole thing, but the children love it. And
exactly. And by the way, that's what they remember, and that's what they tell me. I mean, they're like, hey, Dad, stop working so hard and, spend time with us.
Yeah.
That's really what they want.
That's a beautiful message.
Yeah.
Beautiful place to bring it to a close.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Thanks so much. Yeah. It was really an honor to be with you. And like I say, I mean, in our mutual quest to orange pill the world, we're each pulling a different oar, but
yes,
the boat's moving,
going in the same direction.
We're going in the same direction. Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely. I love talking to you, Larry. You're always full of so much insight, and grateful to have you come and join me here. Where can people? Yeah. Again, the book is the big print.
The big print is on Amazon.
On the internet.
Yeah, the big print is on Amazon. The paperback will be back soon. We're out now. Probably by the time this comes out, it'll be back. It's also, there will be a big print book website, which will be available for group orders and signed copies. I haven't done that yet, but it's coming. There'll be an Audible version. That's coming. I'm on Twitter. Everyone knows I make a lot of noise there. I'm not friendly to the central banks. It's just Lawrence Lepard. My website is ema2.com. I run a fund. My partner and I, David Foley, do that. I'm involved with something called the Bitcoin Opportunity Fund, which is killing it. They were up 64% last year. They do Bitcoin Venture, and Bitcoin public companies. One of the biggest holdings was MicroStrategy, which helped a lot. They're raising money right now. Qualified investors can do that. It's $200,000. So lots of ways to find me, and I'll be out there making noise. I'll tell you the shows I'm going to this year. I'm going to BitBlock Boom in Dallas. I'm going to Las Vegas, Bitcoin. I'm going to Prague, and I might go to Cheat Code. I don't know yet. I'm trying to make a decision on that. But anyone who's there, please come say hello, and I'm happy to sign books for free. So if you got the book. So I'm not going to carry tons of books to these things because they're too heavy.
Yeah. So. Good deal. Well, Larry, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Robert. Really a pleasure to be with you. Enjoyed it. Thanks.
Likewise.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money, and be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.